in 3, 2, 1.
Hey, this is Tom Waddle, worn out former Chicago Bears wide receiver, and you are listening to Greg Braggs in the stands.
Na 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 na. Hey hey, goodbye. C'est la vie, Nagy and Pace. Let's go.
The Bears, they started this new tradition last year where they celebrate their wins the correct way.
Waddle and Sylvie, ESPN 1000, don't miss it.
I know what you mean.
It's like their own Philly.
Okay. Okay, I think what it is.
We shouldn't be showing this. Am I crazy?
What a great sign that is. What have I told you? 17 minutes of rain would wash away 108 years of drought.
Do you see this team growing into the team that you were in 2005?
Great claps, everybody.
You are ridiculous.
There it is, Trae. The highlight of Matt Nagy's career as a head coach for the Chicago Bears. And In a puff of smoke, he is gone, fired, along with Ryan Pace, the GM. Probably the bigger surprise of the day today here on Black Monday. It's been a long time coming. Probably should have happened 365 days ago.
Exactly.
But here we are. George McCaskey righting the wrong of sticking with the collaboration crew. And I am your host, Gregory Braggs Jr., and alongside me is my co-host and, just Twitch legend and ESPN 1000 loyalist and just an all-around great guy, Trae Tunes in the house. Me and Trae are going to try to steer the ship here and have some fun, react to this. And if anybody's watching that wants to tune in or jump in, send me a message and I'll send you the link, and you're welcome to come on and react. It doesn't just have to be Will. We know Will's probably Death Star to get on here with his "I told you so"s, but it's just been a wild, hectic morning. With the news breaking and everyone reacting to it. Trae, when you heard the news this morning, what was your first reaction to everything?
Oh, all right. When I heard the news, Matt Nagy got fired first, and then I'm like, okay, it needs to be it can't just be Nagy. So I wasn't like super, I think everybody saw this coming, so it's not like I was like, yes, he's out of here. So we expected Nagy to get fired. But then when I heard them say that they're going to get rid of Pace as well, I'm like, well, at least you guys got that right. But it's almost like one of your good friends saying that he's finally in this relationship with this girlfriend that's horrible. It's like, yeah, you're happy for them, but now what? It's like, so at least they're headed in the right direction, but let's see where it goes. There's still a lot to go. But I know a lot of people are excited and happy. But, you got to still realize that, this franchise isn't in the best position and we still got a long way to go before we get everything going,
100%. It's a step-by-step process here, but the first steps are underway. It made a lot of sense. I made some different I think Sylvie was going to kill me one day a couple months ago when I was like, if they keep Pace, I'm not going to be upset. My eyes were solely focused on the failures of Matt Nagy to this team. I just felt like, how many different players you're going to give him, how many different quarterbacks you're going to get him, how many different it's always everyone's fault but Matt Nagy's, and I felt like the players on this team were good enough to put a competitive team out on that football field. But at the end of the day, when you consider the collaboration of last year, between Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, and that press conference, and they said collaboration maybe 20 times
at least
about, they're tied together. So it only makes sense to get them out of here together and wipe the slate clean. For the first time in my life, the Bears don't roll one problem over into someone else's. And, it's always been, whether it's the quarterback stays and the GM and head coach, like they got rid of Tressman and Emery, and then they roll John Fox into Ryan Pace or,
right.
Matt Nagy into right. They never just wipe the slate clean. Now, they keep Justin Fields around, obviously, because he's not a problem. He's the solution. So, this is the first time in my life that they're going to wipe the slate clean of the problems of this organization and try to right this wrong. And now it's all about what's next, but you have to give, you have to give some credence or some attention to what's happened this morning. I'm not giving George McCaskey any brownie points for doing what needed to be done. He should have done this last year, and he was too yellow-bellied to do it because he likes these guys and wanted to believe in these guys, but the writing was on the wall. And I got a lot of flack from people, over the last couple of years before this year, truth or this, truth or that, when it came to giving excuses for Mitch Trubisky. And Mitch Trubisky certainly was a flawed quarterback. There's no question about that. Who knows what his career, if he's a career backup or if he's going to get an opportunity as a starter next year, who knows? Who cares? All I know is he wasn't the only problem on this team.
Yeah.
And that's all I tried to point out consistently throughout the end of Mitch Trubisky's career here with the Chicago Bears. And Matt Nagy was at the forefront of my point to that. He was just as big, if not bigger, a bigger problem to the Bears than what Mitch was. I mean, you look at what a team like the Browns is. If Baker Mayfield's not a perfect quarterback, but they get the job done because they know how to run a consistent offense and they have a coaching staff that knows what they're doing. Matt Nagy has no idea what he's doing.
Yeah, and they also had a GM that put a pretty good team around Baker too. So.
Exactly, and they predicate their, whole offensive philosophy on running the ball, playing tough defense, and winning games that way, playing off a play. The Bears don't want to do that. We had a coach 3 years ago in 2019 when we lost to the Saints. After Mitch was out for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks with an injury, they threw it over 50 times, and they only ran the ball for a career low, a franchise record low, 7 times, and 2 of those were jet sweeps. And Matt Nagy had the audacity to come into the press conference and say, I didn't come here to run the I formation. If that should have been the moment we all knew he needed to be fired. But we needed like 15 more reasons and things to see that. But when a coach says that, it just shows that he has no idea what he's doing. Because every coach in the NFL, in the history of this league, has ran the I formation, and he doesn't know how to.
It's like him saying he came here like, I didn't come here to be successful.
Like,
I didn't come
Andy
here to
Reid,
score
where
touchdowns.
he came from, runs the fucking I formation. But this guy didn't come here to run the I. He's going to reinvent the football wheel.
He came here to be bottom third in scoring offense every year.
Right. And then the next year, so then the failures of 2019. 2020 comes around. We bench Mitch to start the year, bring in Nick Foles. They go on a 6-game losing streak. And then this is where the walls start crumbling down on Matt. He has to give up the playbook for the first time. He gave it up again this year. And then he had to go back to Mitch Trubisky. And they coincided with a schedule that favored their success. They
Lions.
Let's not get around it. They won games, but it was also because they had a favorable schedule at the end. But at the end of the day, it was also because they gave up the playbook to Bill Lazor and took Nick Foles out and brought in Mitch Trubisky, the guy he benched. And ultimately, they end up making the playoffs, and it saves Matt Nagy's job a whole 365 days to right now.
Right.
And they go into that collaboration press conference. And if you run that back, everybody wants to joke about collaboration. But if you go back and watch that press conference, him and Ryan Pace and Ted Phillips stand up there and say, all the problems are because of the quarterback. All of the problems.
Pretty much.
And that was, to me, insulting. If you watch this team beyond the quarterback, you knew that the problems were not just the quarterback. Last year we had guys, Javon Wims fighting against the Saints, embarrassing himself, not getting cut, stays on the team. Yeah. And then exactly. They don't cut Javon Wims. They set a precedent for the team. Then they get to the playoffs. Javon Wims drops the biggest play of the game, and Anthony Miller gets in a fight with the very player they told him not to get in a fight with. But we want to talk about how great the culture is. Last year in the collaboration conference, our culture is the envy of the league. No, it isn't. These players did not respect this head coach. These players did whatever they wanted, and we've seen it time and again with penalties, just lack of discipline. And to me, everything has been highlighted by this club dub. I loved club dub in 2018. Yeah. But ever since then, it's the most cringe thing in Bears history. They should have stopped club dub after 2018, done something fresh, whatever you want to do, but stop trying to reignite a flame that 2018 had. And beyond that, when your team starts playing pitifully like we have the last 3 years, to go into a locker room after losing 5 games in a row, each year they've done this. Right. They've had long losing streaks. They win a meaningless game against the Lions, and then they run into the locker room and dance as if they have something to celebrate about. We need to have a higher expectation, a higher standard for ourselves in the city of Chicago. This team needs a higher standard for itself.
You remember what Thomas Jones said about Club Dub?
Exactly.
Yeah,
we talked to Thomas Jones at one of our live remotes here earlier this year, and he was embarrassed by it. And I've heard that from multiple former Chicago Bears. It's one thing to celebrate your wins. Yeah, you go to the locker room and you celebrate. It's just a bad look and a bad precedent to go in there and dance and club dub in that way when your team is in the dumps like we have been for the last 3 years. And that all is the culture that Matt Nagy has built. In the press conference yesterday, they asked him about why had things gone wrong. What are the negatives of the reasonings of why things have gone wrong? And Matt Nagy says, well, I like to focus on the positives. I'm sorry, Matt. This is a big boy business. And if you want to compete at the highest level, you have to be your toughest critic. You have to be your toughest critic. You got all the toughest critics across the city of Chicago. You got to be even harder on yourself. Right. And Matt Nagy doesn't want to do that. He wants the rose-colored glasses, and he only wants to focus on the positives. That's not going to get it done. You think Michael fucking Jordan only focused on the positives? You think Tom Brady only focuses on the positives? You think Bill Belichick only no, they don't. Do you think any of these guys club dub after losing 5 in a row? No, they don't. And I want greatness for my teams, personally. That's what I want. You know? So if you're not striving for that, then get out of the way. I liked Matt Nagy. He was a nice guy. Met him more than a few times at training camp. Met him at Bears 100. Nice guy. But I'm sorry. This isn't a nice guy business. If you're not doing your job, and more importantly, not taking accountability for what you do wrong, then you have to go. And I have been insulted by him over the last 2 years, trying to constantly pin everything on Mitch when he himself is just as big of a problem. And so I am happy this day has come. It's time to bring a coach in here that actually can give some accountability to this franchise. I hope they start with a president of football operations, work their way down to GM and head coach, and let's get a real structure in here. The same way the Cubs did it when Theo Epstein fell into their lap and they brought Jed Hoyer in here. The same way the Chicago Bulls are doing it right now with Mark Eversley and Arturas Karnisovas. We need a makeover to this franchise so we can stop being a laughing stock week in and week out, whether it be on the primetime stage or not.
Right, exactly. I mean, the Bears have been a laughing stock all year long. And of course you get it in the local media a lot, but once you start seeing it on the national stage and, you watch SportsCenter and you just got the whole crew just joking about your favorite football team.
It's an embarrassment.
You're right. It's not a great feeling. And it's like I'm happy to see that they're finally moving in the right direction. And I just hope that they continue that way. I'm not going to act like, you hear all the whispers of who wants to take the job. And, of course, we're going to hear that over the next week or so. But it's like this, like Braggs, you just said, it starts at the top with we need to get a president of football operations in here. Tell Sweaty Teddy to go focus on Arlington and get that in order.
Yep.
Like this, put the right people in the right places and step back and like Jonathan Hood says, like, get your beak out of it. Just let them do what they're supposed to do. Bring in the right people so we can get this thing going, because the team isn't a total wreck. In the NFL, you can go from last to first, and it's like we got the main position, which is quarterback. And if we can just get Justin Fields developed and get that O-line in order, I mean, who knows, like, what can happen? We can get this thing turned around pretty quickly.
I mean, making the right decision is going to be key, which I'm just as nervous about as anything else. But, hey, you got to get lucky sometimes. Did the Cubs get lucky when Theo Epstein fell into their lap?
Exactly.
Sure. I mean, you're hearing about Miami firing Brian Flores. Now, I don't know much about him personally, but I know a lot of people think very highly of him. Maybe, I'm not going to downgrade. Whoever they hire, I'm going to more than likely, unless it's very unlikely whoever they hire, I'm going to be like negative right out the gate about. I'm a fan with hope, and I'm an eternal optimist. So I'm going to get behind who they hire, and then whether he proves us right or wrong as far as being the right guy will be determined at a later date. I mean, my eyes are on Jim Harbaugh. And am I going to be upset if Jim Harbaugh's not here? Yeah, but not enough to hate on whoever they hire. So I want, to me, it's a home run. You got Jim Harbaugh sitting right there. The Raiders have moved on to the playoffs, who seemed like their biggest, competitor to potentially pull him from Michigan. Yeah. There are articles, if a quick Google search of Jim Harbaugh to the Bears, Jim Harbaugh coaching the Bears, will pull up articles Jim Trotter wrote years ago that Jim Harbaugh has said that this is his dream job to come to and coach the Chicago Bears. Well, your dreams don't typically change. So if his dream job is the Chicago Bears need a head coach. They've fired their GM, so now you can get a guy in here like a Jeff Ireland who he has familiarity with him. Oh, and by the way, his defensive coordinator from San Francisco that he had a lot of success with, Vic Fangio, has also been fired, who also was our defensive coordinator with a lot of the players that will still be here next year. It is a no-brainer to me that that's who should be here. I know a lot of people have that. He's a very controversial coach. You either feel one way about him or the other. But to me,
he's a big personality, right?
He's a big personality. Yeah. But to me, a culture changer. You think Jim Harbaugh is going to club dub after a 5-game losing streak? I highly fucking doubt it. And I just want a guy in here that's going to hold himself accountable, but also the players accountable, because they need that. Yeah, they liked Matt Nagy. I don't think they respected him, and I think there's a very big difference, which I've had these discussions and arguments on Twitter with different people about. You can like a guy and not respect him.
Yeah,
you can like your substitute teacher.
You didn't call him out on this shit all the time.
Right, exactly. You can like a substitute teacher, but that's also because you can get away with fucking everything.
Exactly. That's why they liked him.
Exactly. And you know what? Who they also like is when a coach gets the best out of them, holds their feet to the fire and gets the best out of them and gets them that payday that they never thought they could get.
Right.
Because they're out there to win. They're also out there to get paid. So if you got a coach that can get the most out of you, and all of a sudden your next contract is something you never thought was possible, you're going to love that coach. That's why Bill Belichick is respected in New England. He, who knows how he is behind the scenes with these players, but if he's tough on them, they don't mind because they know they're going to the playoffs. They know they could get to the Super Bowl. They know that they could eventually be, legendary in New England, legendary amongst the NFL, eyes and ears of fans and analysts alike. That's what players strive for. They don't strive for club dub. So to me, that's the no-brainer hire. But it's a two-way street. Jim has to want to come here, and then the other pipe dream that a lot of people, are talking about is Sean Payton. It's been reported by Albert Breer. Maybe not reported, but he's putting out cookie crumbs as if it could be a possibility.
Wouldn't they have to trade for him?
They would have to trade for him, but the Saints are in a rebuild, or at least assumed rebuild with no quarterback in sight, and who knows how things work out for the Saints, and he has a connection to the Bears. But if those two are not a possibility, then I start looking at a guy like Greg Roman from the Ravens. That's my personal. If we're gonna go past the pipe dream candidates, my guy is Greg Roman from the Ravens, who's shown me he can adjust his playbook. Because if there's the biggest criticisms of Matt Nagy for me, outside of keeping a disciplined team and accountability, was his lack of adjustments.
Yeah,
couldn't adjust after 2018. can't adjust coming out of buys, can't adjust coming into new seasons, can't adjust at halftime of games. Can't adjust. It's a punch counter punch league, and Matt Nagy never had a counter punch.
Look what happened in the last game. What, they scored 17 points in the first half and just come out.
And then all they do is throw the ball in the second half and run the ball like 9 times and lose to the Vikings in a meaningless, pitiful game. And yes, but you look at a guy like Greg Roman from the Ravens. You want to talk about adjusting? They had Joe Flacco. They get all the way to a Super Bowl. And then they bring in Lamar Jackson, a completely different quarterback. They run their offense completely different, adhere to his strengths, his needs, and they're a competitive team year in and year out. Lamar Jackson goes out, and Tyler Huntley comes in. Who? Well, now all of a sudden, if you read through Ravens Twitter, you got fans that are arguing whether or not Tyler Huntley is a better quarterback than Lamar Jackson because of the way the offense adheres to his strengths, and they start playing more competitive football despite not having their star quarterback Lamar Jackson out there. Oh, and yeah, Greg Roman was the offensive coordinator for Jim Harbaugh when they had Alex Smith and then went to Colin Kaepernick, playing 2 different styles of football. So for me, that's a guy that I got my hard eye on. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to see how it plays out, and hope against hope that these guys get lucky, because that's what it's going to take. Just luck. At the end of the day, they need some luck. Takes some skill, takes a lot of luck, and I hope they get lucky. God, do I hope they get lucky.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you bring in, all right, like say if you bring in a big name coach like Harbaugh, are you going to allow them to try to give them their GM suggestions? Or
absolutely
going to be a package thing where they come in just as a group together, like the new GM, new head coach, new
absolutely
staff?
If it's a guy like Harbaugh who has a resume and an understanding of what he wants to be successful as a head coach in the NFL, has done it for a long time at both levels, and has had success at both levels, I'm taking everything he's asking for and trying to get him the ingredients he needs. Right. Now if it falls down to a guy that doesn't have head coaching experience, maybe you keep the pecking order in check and let the GM do his job, let the head coach do his job. But it should always be a team effort. They should all be in that room together, looking at that draft board, trying to decide who they need to bring in to everybody all together, except for George and Ted, who should never be in another football room again. Shut up, get your your suite, and collect your money and go build us a new stadium in Arlington Heights, and don't ever have any input on football decisions again. That should be the next announcement, and we're going to find out here at 1 p.m. coming up here in about 25 minutes. George McCaskey is going to have a press conference with the media via Zoom, and we're hoping that the Bears stream that live so the fans can also see it. If they don't, that'll be the next thing I flip out about here on today's show. But if they do, then I'm assuming we're going to hear something about Ted Phillips, who did not get on the chopping block with Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. And I know a lot of us, including our guy Mark Silverman, would definitely have wanted to see that. There have been reports from the Bears blog, Jeff Hughes, who gets a lot of fire and heat from Bears Twitter because of his delivery on Twitter with some people at times. But at the same time, he's gotten a lot right over the last few weeks, and he's gotten things right in the past as well. And he's reporting that Ted Phillips is going to retire after next year. And that wouldn't surprise me in the slightest, that George won't fire a guy as long as he agrees to a forced retirement and go off into the sunset gracefully instead of being fired with the clown show that was today. So if that's the case, great, because I'm done with Ted Phillips as well. For all of the people that have said, Ted Phillips, doesn't have any input in the football decision-making, Mark Silverman has debunked that several times. Ted Phillips was in the room when the Bears asked to trade up for LaDainian Tomlinson, and Ted Phillips said no. He's made other decisions with coaching hires and everything else, but that one in particular, not agreeing to trade up for LaDainian Tomlinson should get you fired.
This should be our thing. The teacup should be our thing.
Who wants LaDainian Tomlinson, a generational running back? Embarrassing. And Ted Phillips was in on that decision, and he gets the benefit of the doubt from George because he helped, renovate this stadium for what it is today. And a lot of fans hate the renovations that were done for the stadium, but George has always had a heart for Ted because of the money he makes him. And in my opinion, this charter franchise could be making a lot more. Right. They don't do, they've made tons of money over the last 2 decades. They probably make double it if you have a president that actually knows what he's doing. Ted is an accountant, a bookie. He's not a guy that should be the face president of your football organization. And so if he retires, so be it. I'm not,
that's next year. He doesn't need to be involved in any of the hiring process this year either. And that's what I'm kind of worried about too.
Absolutely. He does not need to be in the decision-making process here going forward. Now, there's been a lot of different rumors about maybe the Bears bring in a president of football operation, similar to how, the Cubs brought in Theo or something of that nature. Maybe it's a guy, we've heard Trace Armstrong, we've heard different, Peggy Kaczynski, a longtime Bears beat reporter. She floated that name out there like a month ago on Twitter.
That would be great.
Yeah, Trace Armstrong.
He's connected in the league.
Exactly. Trace immediately debunked it, but then if you kind of peel behind the curtain, Trace and Matt Nagy have the same agent. So, Trace isn't trying to overstep a month ago, but maybe that's a name that becomes something that comes to fruition. Trace Armstrong, by the way, as I was just on with my guys Shane and Phil Atoshin, Shane Marsall and Phil Atoshin with the Tape Never Lies Network, they pointed out, hey, Trace Armstrong played with Jim Harbaugh. All the better, because that's who I want at the end of the day. I desperately want Jim Harbaugh here with the Chicago Bears, but it should be interesting to see how it all plays out, whether it be president, GM, or head coach. But finally, we're getting some answers today.
See, the one thing about Jim Harbaugh coming here is that it would put a lot of the focus on him because he's such a polarizing figure. And it's like the team themselves could, get back to the basics and, just, worry about playing football. And like Devontae Adams said something last week about, to young wide receivers about just getting out there and run your routes. And it's like you just want somebody like that, in our building to have that kind of culture. And, since don't be all cute with your drills, just do drills that are going to translate into the game. And you want, like you see receivers like Darnell Mooney, he's already a really good route runner, maybe a little undersized. But if you can get people like that and Daz Newsome and all these other people to just focus on getting better and you get that culture going around and you're not worried about like, oh, is your coach going to be here? And you don't have to worry about all those questions, and you can just focus on getting better. And that's what you really want. You just want your team to get better. And
1,000%. 1,000%. And we're almost there. Now we just need a little luck that they get this right. And because it's crucial, it's one of the biggest decisions every time the newest decision is the biggest decision in Chicago Bears history, but
this
how many times
because
do
of
you
the rookie
get
contract with Justin?
Exactly.
This is really big.
How many times have we had a quarterback prospect like Justin Fields? We thought that Mitch Trubisky, because of where he was selected, number 2 overall, was that prospect, and then they bring in Matt Nagy to be his groom, and that all fell apart very fast because, as it turns out, both decisions were the wrong decisions in hiring Matt Nagy and drafting Mitchell Trubisky. But now you have Justin Fields here. If you're the type that doesn't believe in him, good for you. Go jump in the lake. But for me personally, I believe that Justin Fields could be a great quarterback in this league, but it's not going to be done by himself. He needs a head coach to come in here and get the most out of him.
Right, he has all the right tools. He has
can
the
Deshaun
athleticism.
Watson play great with Bill O'Brien not knowing what he's doing in with the Texans? Sure.
Right.
But to have that ultimate marriage and get the most out of a talented prospect like Justin Fields, you got to get this head coach right. You got to get this GM right and take it from there. If you don't, Justin, if you get this wrong, Justin will be just as much of a bust as Mitchell Trubisky was. And I hate saying that, but it's the truth. The chances of Justin Fields, overcoming another bad coach is not happening. I don't even want to say slim. It won't happen. He will fail. So they have to get this right in order for Justin Fields to become the quarterback we all know he can be or hope he can be, however you want to frame it. And I completely agree, Mike. Justin is flat out more talented. His IQ, more importantly to me, with how he processes the game, the speed of the game.
And that was my knock on Mitch. And like Mitch, he was a great athlete. He could throw the ball. He wasn't accurate. He's not the worst quarterback ever. But he just didn't have the IQ of an NFL quarterback to me. Like, he needs to be in a perfect system where you don't do too many reads and stuff. And he'll probably be pretty good in that system. And it's like with Justin Fields, it was almost like he was set up to fail, and they didn't put him in a position to succeed at all, or even to be honest, what quarterback could succeed in the position under Matt Nagy offense? It's like whoever they threw out there wasn't going to be successful because, it's just the scheme didn't make any sense. It's like You're not going to run the ball. You're not setting up for anything. When
you throw the ball, it's just constant curls, pitches, 10 yards. Not even. They need a first down. They need a first down on 4th and 8, and they throw it 7 yards. It's 3rd and goal or 4th and goal. They need to throw it into the end zone. They don't. They throw it short of the end zone, and then you blame the players, but it's the coach that needs to get the players on the right page and doing the right thing. So, we have our first guest. I know Will's calling right now. I don't know.
Right.
He called you. I heard the ring. Now he's calling me. We can send him the link, but let's send him the link after our first guest, because I put out on Twitter, if you're a fan of the show and you want to tune in and you want to jump on and give your own, reaction to this, you're more than welcome. And we keep the door open for everybody, including Will, who will get his chance to come on and yell at us about whatever craziness he's going to yell at us about. Yeah. But for right now, our guy, Jordan Silveira, is that how it's pronounced, Jordan?
My man, Greg, I appreciate the ad. Last name Silveira, no sweat.
Okay, Jordan Silveira, absolutely. Happy to have you on. And, I've recently gotten to know you here on Twitter these last couple weeks because we crossed paths with our love for Jim Harbaugh, and you have a lot of different stats and fun facts about why Jim Harbaugh would be a great hire. And you can get into that all you'd want, but I want to give you the floor to tell us what your reaction to this morning's news was and what that means to you as a Chicago Bears fan.
You got it, Greg. Greg, I appreciate it more than you know. As you know all about me, I'm a big Harbaugh supporter. Secondary as of this morning, and if you search through my timeline, you'll see I'm a big fan of Brian Flores as well. I advise anybody to come view my Twitter, Jordan T. Silveira. I don't mean to do the shameless plug, but it's a scenario where I go deep into the coaching hires. Previously, Jim Harbaugh, end of October, so you can call me an early Harbaugh stan. Brian Flores, November, before he was even considered to be fired, so call me as much of a fan of football as you could find. As far as this morning, what you'll notice is I am happiest because I feel like last night we were in almost a dim scenario. As you put out, you said it was the darkest before the dawn, and that's true. The situation that I was feeling was, wow, if the Chargers lose, if the Raiders lose, the Raiders may very well have a chance at our guy Harbaugh. I don't want to believe that, but it's entirely possible that would be the case. And I have to be honest, if it's not Harbaugh, I'm not interested in many others. Coming off the Jay Glazer report that Brian Flores was safe and sound. I was bummed because Flores is easily neck and neck with Harbaugh to me. If you want me to get into that, I'm more than welcome to. And hearing this morning that Flores was let go, unfortunately, and we moved on from both Pace and Nagy, which that's a whole other subject if you want me to talk about Pace going, because that's huge, big move. But feeling like there were a limited amount of options to now feeling like I am completely happy, whether it's Harbaugh, whether it's Flores, we are completely set up for success. So I'll stop there, let you jump in. But if there's anything else you want me to get into, please let me know.
No, I like that because I was talking with my guys Phil and Shane this morning. You seem to have some knowledge on Brian Flores as well. I'm not, I'm no football expert here. I might scream, rant, and rave just like any other fan, but I'm basically unfamiliar with Brian Flores. I've got my eyes set. I'm a tunnel vision guy, and I want Jim Harbaugh so bad it hurts, because I want a guy in here that understands what being a Chicago Bear is all about. And I understand his fire and passion for the game. I understand how, I heard Frank Gore in an interview a few months ago on a podcast talking about he was the favorite coach he ever played for, would run through a brick wall for him. Frank Gore's heading to the Hall of Fame. That's good enough for me. I've seen the culture he's changed at Michigan. Has he won a national championship? No. Is he as good as the teams in the SEC? That's a high bar to hit for any fan expecting that. But I do know from friends that I have that are diehard Michigan fans, they used to be terrible before Jim Harbaugh was there. They didn't have consistent winning seasons. They didn't beat Ohio State like they have this year. So Jim Harbaugh has done more than enough at Michigan. And if he doesn't end up going to the NFL, he's going to get a pay raise for what he's doing at Michigan. But it takes luck. And that's what I was pointing out earlier. When the Cubs needed a culture change, needed that guy to be, what brought the Holy Grail home for the Chicago Cubs, they needed some luck. And Theo Epstein fell into their laps. That wasn't planned. It just so happened and coincided in the year that we were hiring that he was on his way out in Boston. So now you've got a chance, if Jim Harbaugh isn't the option, maybe Brian Flores is that lucky strike that comes out of nowhere. Maybe there's other coaches or GM candidates that we're not even thinking about right now that could fall off. And that could be what tumbles right into our lap, because, you've seen some different people put out on Twitter, to be the coach of the Chicago Bears or GM of Chicago Bears is a good place to be because of Justin Fields.
Yes, it is.
And I want the best. Will we get the best? That remains to be seen. But that's why I'm looking at all the top candidates. I'm looking at Jim Harbaugh. I'm looking at Sean Payton. Hell, I'm looking at Mike Tomlin if the Steelers are crazy enough to let him go. They just made the playoffs, so unlikely. But I don't care. That's where I'm at as a fan. I want the best for my team. If I can't get the best, then I'll start looking at the next slate of people. If Brian Flores is great in your book, just as good of a hire as Jim Harbaugh, I'll take your word on it. But if you want to expand on that, I'd love for you to, because like I said, I'm mostly unfamiliar with what Brian Flores brings to the table.
Please and thank you. And I appreciate it. And I appreciate the time on the floor. As you know, I was spitting facts at you about Harbaugh, and you were just hitting me with the more and more and more. Do the same right now with Brian Flores. So the reason, just so we're clear, I still have Harbaugh at head coach 1 by the smallest of margins. And the reason for that is simply because he's got the offensive background. I'll start briefly with the negatives with Flores, just because I'm a believer, let's get that out the way and focus on the positives. The negatives with Flores is that he's a defensive-minded coach first and foremost. That's a problem because what you have happen in Buffalo, in different areas, and you're seeing it with Vrabel last year when Arthur Smith took off to Atlanta. When you have a defensive coach, the league's always looking for the rock star offensive coordinators. As soon as we get a successful offensive coordinator, if Flores was the coach, he's going to be leaving. That part I can't deny, and that is trouble. The second word of Brian Flores is that throughout his time in Miami, he could not find an offensive staff competent of developing players. That's a huge issue. I do not want to undermine that, especially when you're talking about Justin Fields and the young offensive talent that
Lovie Smith had that same problem.
Yes, he did. It's a big issue, so I don't want to undermine that. But when you talk about Brian Flores, you're talking about a coach that, and this is high praise, but I don't know, take me at my word. If, as Robert Quinn said, my word, my balls, that's all I got. So the situation there is I look at Brian Flores and I know this is high praise, but I see Mike Tomlin. I see a guy that gets buy-in from his players like no other. They love playing for him. If you've taken a look, I can kind of point you to some stuff on Twitter of Dolphins players just going that they're sick to their stomach to see that Brian Flores is gone today. So I think that Brian Flores gets buy-in from his players. I think that we've fallen in love with the Vic Fangio scheme, rightfully so. But I want to kind of put this out there to whoever's listening that as great as that too high shell, middle of the field open cover 2 scheme is, where you're rolling the safeties that like Fangio does, that is the coronavirus, for lack of a better phrase, just considering the time in the league. Everybody's running it. It's moved to Joe Woods. It's moved to the Browns, the Packers. It's everywhere. Chargers are running it now. I mean, I don't have to go into it. It's the Fangio system's everywhere. My point is, why do we want to? The league is cyclical. Why do we want to continue to perpetuate something that everybody's going to catch on to? The difference with Flores, and this is huge, is that he runs the Belichick scheme. What you're looking at is 5-0 fronts. You're looking at dime packages, a preference to DBs over edge. You're looking at cover 1. You can see just time and time again where that scheme has trumped the best of offensive minds. And I'm not even talking about Bill Belichick himself. I'm talking about Brian Flores when he stumped Sean McVay and the Rams last year. I'm talking about when he stumped Lamar Jackson and the Ravens this year. It happens over and over and over again. And rather than get the vanilla that everybody else has, why would you not look for the chocolate scheme that nobody else is using? Those are just a few things. I could go deeper, but I have such high respect for Brian.
My concern with, a guy like Brian Flores and a defensive-minded coach, and I have at the end of the day, I just want them to get the right coach. So,
don't we all?
It doesn't matter what I think. If it's the right coach, I'm not going to complain. My concern with a defensive coach, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but let's say it's not even because of offensive coordinator failures like we went through with Lovie Smith, who couldn't get the right offensive coordinator and staff to come in. And how were you with Kyle Orton and Rex Grossman and even, Jay Cutler, but some feel that if we had the right coordinator, maybe we could have got a lot more out of him, but Jay had his own faults too in that respect. But at the same time, we kept rolling over offensive coordinators with Jay Cutler because of offensive coordinator failures. Now, let's say it's not because of failures. Let's say Brian Flores brings in a great offensive coordinator. Well, if he reclamates the Chicago Bears offense into the 21st century and he takes Justin Fields and turns him into a star in this league, he's going to be the first in line for a head coaching candidate. And then we're going to run into, even good or bad, we're just going to roll over offensive coordinators. And then he's just, Justin's going to fall into the same trap that Jay Cutler did, where he's just into a new offensive system every other year. And that's not conducive to success. You need consistency. So what are your thoughts on my fears in that regard? Or should I not worry about that at the end of the day because we have the head coach in place and the culture, and the foundation and for that respect?
No, I appreciate the question. I think it's incredibly valid. And frankly, I don't want to argue with it. I think that the proof is in the pudding. When you have that defensive guy as your head coach, the moment you have a successful offensive coordinator, they get snatched up. There's no denying that. The only argument I would make to you is, the one that just pops to my head is Russell Wilson. And I'll kind of line this up. Just give me a second. With Justin Fields being so young, he's impressionable. He absolutely needs to grow with a wonderful offensive coordinator, no doubt about it. But once Justin Fields, assuming we get there and he's developed and he becomes that star quarterback, the similar way to Russell Wilson, when you bring in a new offensive coordinator, they know what they want. They know what they're ready to go. And I know that, bring up Aaron Rodgers, I understand he's a freak, a mutant, one of a kind. But in that scenario, he does fine when they switch over to a Mike LaFleur instead of a Mike McCarthy. Look at Dak Prescott as they've changed offensive coordinators. Look at Justin Herbert. The Justin Herbert one's a great scenario because I often think about how, it was a worry of, well, what happens if you fire, the support staff that brought Justin in? And it's like, yeah, well, look at Herbert. Anthony Lynn and Pep Hamilton brought him in. Staley comes in with Joe Lombardi and is killing it. So it's a scenario where I think if Justin Fields gets that support system to develop and then an offensive coordinator leaves, it's not a problem because he knows what he wants. He knows what he likes. He'll have a bigger voice in the organization and guide his own path, if that makes sense. That'd be my argument to it.
Absolutely. So we're about potentially 5 minutes, unless George is late to his press conference, potentially, 5 to 10 minutes away from George McCaskey joining the Zoom, with the Bears press, and we'll have to hear from him. Trae had to jump out for a second, LP Hella, so I'm not trying to disappoint you here, but Trae had to jump out for a second. His mom is in need of some help, something going on with her car or something like that, so he had to hop downstairs and help her out. And as soon as he gets all that situated, he will be back into the stream talking, so I don't have to talk as much. And that is why we brought Jordan. I'm going to butcher this again. Silvera, because I keep wanting to say Silvira because I see that I in there, but it's Jordan Silvera, a fun Twitter follow. You follow him at Jordan T. Silvera, and he gives a lot of fun Matt Nagy, fun facts, and that's what I'm always here for. But, I'm seeing some different guys in here talking about Harbaugh, talking about Flores, and I just find it funny because, I see Capitalistic Czar saying Ryan Day over Jim Harbaugh.
Oh, no.
And I'd love to get your thoughts on that because, one thing that stuck out to me when Jim Harbaugh beat Ohio State, one of his comments after the game, because Ryan Day is always talking about beating Michigan by 50 or whatever. And Jim Harbaugh said, in respect to Ryan Day, some people were born on third and think they hit a triple. Yep. And that was certainly a nod to Ryan Day, taking over Urban Meyer's squad and now, acting like he's this big time coach. Ryan Day was Justin Fields' coach in college, and they had a lot of success together. There are some that would want Ryan Day, as Capitalistic Czar, maybe he does, would want Ryan Day here as the Chicago Bears head coach. What are your thoughts on the potential of that marriage coming back for Justin Fields?
Can't stand it. I have to be honest with you. I can't stand it. One, just because I don't think it's realistic. I see a scenario where if you were, and this is somewhat, to be clear, it's somewhat of the Harbaugh situation. He's kind of got his own palace in Michigan. Why would you want to leave? Except the argument there is that he's never going to compete on a regular basis with the powerhouses. Let's be frank, it was kind of a blessing that he beat OSU one time in the last, 5, 6, 7 years. The issue with Ryan Day is that he has his palace. Why would you ever want to leave OSU? He's king there. He's got a talent pool that just continues to cycle through. And for what? To go coach Justin Fields? And this is no knock on Fields, but the reality is, and respectfully to Realistic Czar, whoever that was, tell me why. Tell me why you want Ryan Day. Is it scheme? Can you tell me what scheme he runs? Can you tell me how that benefits Justin Fields? What does he bring other than a connection with Justin Fields? It's the same people that say, well, let's go ahead and bring Olave in or Wilson because he's got a connection with Justin Fields. Well, what is the extent beyond that? That's not enough for me to say, let's go ahead and bring Ryan Day in. He spent a time with a cup of coffee in Philadelphia as an offensive assistant, never was even an offensive coordinator, was handed the keys to the castle from Urban Meyer in Ohio State, and now all of a sudden we want to crown him as the next coach of the Chicago Bears. It just doesn't make sense.
Right.
That's my take. Sorry.
No, I'm there with you. And, when, Jim Harbaugh beats the brakes off him and says a statement like that, that's why I want Jim Harbaugh here.
Yep.
I want a guy that's going to talk his shit, and hang his nuts, when he's.
Can we talk about how Harbaugh was on nobody's radar and now every Bears fan wants to act like they've been a Harbaugh supporter for the last 6 months?
My favorite were the people that were like, oh, let's talk about, I had a guy coming at me on Twitter all the time. Let's talk about realistic candidates. Jim Harbaugh isn't realistic. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see how the stars are lining up here. As I said before, Jim Trotter, very respected Sports Illustrated reporter for years. He had a report out there years ago that this is his dream job, the Chicago Bears. He played for the Chicago Bears. It only stands to reason that this is something that could happen when you also include the fact that Jim Harbaugh is not coaching at Alabama. He's coaching at Michigan. So, Michigan's only going to have as high a ceiling as they possibly have. And I don't think they're ever win a national championship. He's had success in the NFL. Here's an opportunity for him to come back. I'm going to attempt, Trae's not here, so it's tough for me, but I'm going to try to share my screen here and try to pull up this Matt Nagy press conference, because apparently we've gone live. And so bear with me here for a second because I'm not good at this, but this is where we need my guy Trae, because he's the whiz when it comes to the tech stuff. But I will do my best to pull this up myself. Trae's working with his mom. Here is George McCaskey.
Let's hear it.
Can you hear it?
I cannot. I mean, let me start. I know that once you get the sound going, I'll shut up. But let me start by just saying I think it's huge that we're not seeing Ted Phillips in the room. I mean, say what you want. I really want to try to temper Bears fans' expectations, because sure, we wiped away Pace, we wiped away Nagy, but the reality is the rotten core still exists with McCaskey and Phillips. And until you shed that, which unfortunately we're never going to be able to shed George, but until that gets fixed, it's a situation where I'd like to temper expectations, because, God, these are the people that hired Nagy, they're the people that hired Emery, they're the people that hired Corsi, they're the people that have hired Trestman. We're about to head our way full on into Leslie Frazier, and that's a scary reality in itself. So, enjoy the hope, ride high, but try to be realistic. They could screw this up. But seeing no Phillips there is a start. It gives the impression that real change is happening.
Okay, let me see what I'm doing here.
Thank the larger Bears family.
There we go. I can hear it.
This is a demanding business, and it requires extraordinary sacrifices from players, coaches, football operations staff, and their families. We're grateful for those sacrifices and for the people who make them. The decisions we're making today are especially difficult because Ryan and Matt are outstanding men. They have high character and have always represented the Bears with dignity and class. They gave everything they had to the Bears. We appreciate those efforts. In a discipline dominated by outsized personalities and egos, they are remarkably down to earth and free of ego, always putting team before themselves. 2018 was a great ride, 12 wins and a division title. Ryan was executive of the year and Matt was coach of the year. We thought we were on our way. Unfortunately, it could not be sustained. Instead, we regressed. Our offense failed to show improvement. We continued to struggle at home. We did not close the gap within our division. In the end, we didn't win enough games. Our guys never quit, and that's a tribute to our players, the type of player Ryan looked for in the draft and free agency, and the way Matt and his staff coached them. It's a little unfair to highlight individual players in a team sport, but I want to commend David Montgomery and Roquan Smith, who gave everything they had on every play. That's why they're fan favorites. At the end of the 2020 season, we had a decision to make. Matt's one-loss record was well above 500, and we have been to the playoffs 2 out of 3 seasons, but with 0 playoff wins. We felt that Ryan and Matt had earned the opportunity to improve upon the results of 2019 and 2020. That continuity was the best route to positive results. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. Over 4 seasons, we beat the teams we were expected to beat. Too often, though, we didn't beat the better teams. And you have...
One second.
I got to give it to him. He's being honest.
Yeah,
head coach limited by philosophy, scheme, whether a candidate's background is on the offensive side of the ball, defensive, or special teams, whether a candidate has previous head coaching experience, whether a candidate's background is in the college game or the pro game, or financial considerations. Our search team will consist of myself, Ted Phillips, Hall of Famer Bill Polian, our Vice President of Player Engagement, Sue Campbell, and our Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Tanisha Wade. I expect that we will reach a consensus on both positions. Ultimately, though, the decision on the next general manager and head coach will be mine. Ted has done an outstanding job as president and CEO of the Bears and will continue in that role. Our family has complete faith in him. He has persuaded me that with the pending acquisition of the Arlington Park property and its evaluation as a possible future Bears stadium occupying much of his time and attention, the general manager should report to me. In this modified organizational structure, general manager will continue to oversee the entire football operation, including the head coach. The GM will report to ownership. Bill Polian is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame because of his success as a pro football executive, including his hiring of 2 head coaches, Marv Levy and Tony Dungy, who are themselves in the Hall of Fame. He is well regarded in league circles and has a lot of contacts. We consider ourselves very fortunate to have Bill assisting us in our search. Sue Campbell is on board to offer his perspective on the candidates, including and especially how will our players respond to this candidate as our leader. Tanisha Wade was recently named to the newly created position, Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. She is involved in all of our hiring. These are the most significant hires we make. Diversity is a critical part of the process. We are committed to providing a fair opportunity throughout the process to people of color. Frustrated Bears may be thinking, what makes him think he's going to get it right this time? We're confident that with the experience we've gained, with the makeup of our search team, we will find a general manager and a head coach who will lead our Bears to the success that all Bears fans deserve. Thank you, and I'll be happy to take your questions. Adam?
Okay, first question, Hub. Well, George, first of all, I know this is a really difficult time for you and the family, that these are people you're fond of, that you had to let go. And so I hope you and everybody is doing okay and getting ready to move on to the next challenge. Obviously you are, because you just answered my first 4 or 5 questions in your opening statement. So I'll move to the next one. There's been a lot of focus on the timing of everything and the opportunity to be out front in your search. Had you at any time notified Matt or Ryan as to what was going to happen? Have you already begun talking to any candidates? And if not, how critical is it to get the general manager hired first before you can get into the coaching search?
Matt and Ryan were informed of our decision this morning. We'll start contacting candidates today. Ideally, the general manager would be selected first.
That's not good.
We see
we're
head coach
I
candidate.
got plenty to say, but we'll wait whenever you're ready.
We're going to do what it takes to get him in-house.
If I could just follow up real quickly, though, in terms of a general manager with unfettered control of the football operation, wouldn't that restrict you a little bit if you had already chosen a coach before he came on board?
I think with Bill's guidance, we're going to be able to find a partnership of general manager and a head coach that will work. Like I said, we would prefer to hire the general manager first.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Next question, Dan Weaver.
George, I'm curious what your resistance is to the attempt to try a new model where someone with a more sophisticated football background would oversee the general manager position.
Thank you, Dan,
Great
for that
question.
In our structure, it's the general manager who has ultimate football authority and oversight over the entire football operation.
Still doesn't get it.
Structures work for different teams in different sports. We think this is the structure that will work best for us.
Need someone to hold the general manager accountable.
The general manager, and obviously that relates to the evaluation of Ryan, and then obviously going into your search going forward for a new general manager. What for you are the specifics you look at, whether it's metrics, analytics, whatever it may be, to determine whether a general manager is successful in that role?
Kill him, Dan, please. Kill him.
Well, this is a bottom line business. So one loss record is important. Number of difference makers you have on your team, the number of quality players you have on your team, the core of the team, and how the team is put together are all factors that are considered.
Next question, Pat Finley.
Hi, George. A year ago, you sat up here and said that you would look for progress. How did you measure it? Did it go beyond wins and losses? And did you lean on a consultant or any outside voices over the last month or two?
He just said,
when evaluating whether you would make this decision.
He just said Bill Polian.
We've talked to a number of people throughout.
Who, by the way, I'm not a fan of.
Pro football world. We asked Bill to help us with evaluating our general manager and head coach and helping us make a decision on whether to retain and replace, and if we moved to a replacement situation, to help us in our search to find the replacements.
When did that process begin, and can you tell us about the other people you leaned on?
It started at some point during the season. I can't recall exactly when. As far as our conversations with other people in football, we consider those conversations to be private, and we will not be revealing the identities of those people or the substance of those conversations.
Next question, Adam Hogue.
George, just to make sure, you did say that Ted will be helping in the search for GM and head coach, right?
That's correct.
So obviously, the GM going forward reporting to you is slightly different. With that change, why do you still have Ted involved in finding the GM?
Thank you, Adam.
Great question.
Because I trust Ted implicitly, because I have great respect for his judgment.
That is a problem.
His instincts when it comes to the people that we're interviewing. And in the end, he'll be negotiating the contract with the general manager and the head coach.
Kevin Fishbane.
George, having gone through these interviews a few times now, what have you learned that's going to help guide your approach in the interviews that's going to be different? Are there different things you're looking for, different qualities you're looking for as you meet with these prospective GMs and head coaches that maybe you might not have looked for the other times you've done this?
Positivity, consistency.
We'll be looking for leaders, both in the general manager and the head coach. In our conversations with Bill Polian, in fact, he just wrote a book, Super Bowl Blueprints, where he talks about what it takes to get to and win the Super Bowl. And he said he was even struck by great teams have coaches that the players respect. They don't have to like them, they don't have to love them, but they respect them. So the primary quality we'll be looking for in both the general manager and the head coach is leadership.
Shots fired.
Brad Biggs.
Hi, George. Football operations has not been, good enough because that leads you down the road to get to today's actions. You have a new stadium initiative going. How do you handle two parallel projects that seem like both would be full-time initiatives?
Well, they are both full-time initiatives, and we're adding staffing and hiring outside vendors to help us with our exploration of the Arlington Park property as a possible stadium site. That is a long-term proposition. In the meantime, we're focused on the here and now, and the more important business of finding the next general manager and head coach of the Chicago Bears.
Jason Leisure.
Hey George, do you believe that the Bears would be? Do you believe the Bears would be better off if you had made these changes a year ago? Well, like I said at the time, we thought the continuity was the best route forward. We felt that both Ryan and Matt deserved another opportunity, being to the playoffs 2 out of 3 seasons, above 500 record from a coaching standpoint. We felt that they deserved, based on the body of work of both of them, another opportunity.
That wasn't the question. Would you have been better off firing them?
George, based on that optimism you had
He doesn't want to
at this
admit
time
it.
last year, what was the most frustrating part of this past season for you?
Justin Fields, say it.
There were a lot of frustrating parts. Another lengthy losing streak. We had one in 2019, one in 2020, one in 2021. And usually those are season enders. I admired the way our guys stuck together, didn't point fingers.
Same messages.
But at some point, general manager and the head coach have to come up with a way to snap us out of a losing streak before the season is ruined.
Mark Potash.
Hey George, you mentioned that you think this model with you at the top works. I'm curious why you think this model works. I mean, with 2 winning seasons and no playoff wins in your 11 seasons, isn't there merit to the argument that somebody else should be heading this search and that the GM should be reporting to a Bill Polian type
Good
only?
for you,
I mean, do you get it that a lot of Bears are unhappy with your record as well?
Potsy.
A lot of Bears fans are unhappy, and we're unhappy too, and we're frustrated, and we understand that there's not really a whole lot that can be said today that is going to make people feel better about the situation. And it may even be that once the candidates are introduced, there will be people who say, oh, you picked the wrong guy or you didn't get it right or whatever. The only opportunity to produce results is on the field, and that won't be for some time to come. But we think in time, it'll be shown that we've chosen the right people to lead the Bears.
But George, I'm referring to your record as the chairman. How are you accountable for the record that you have? Like you said, it's a bottom line business, wins and losses.
Damn, Potsy.
No playoff wins.
Get him, Potsy.
That's not a great record. So how are you accountable for it? And like I said, does that lend merit to the idea that somebody else should be, like a Bill Polian type should be at the top?
Yeah, my performance is reviewed by ownership and the board of directors, and ownership has informed
Who are
me
all your family and friends?
to continue in this role.
Thanks.
Herb Howard.
George, is it your preference that the next general manager comes in with the plan of kind of reloading some of the assets that you already have, or do you prefer them to view this as a complete rebuild where guys like perhaps a Khalil Mack
we can still win.
Leverage for future assets? And do you have a preference whether they view this as a rebuild or a reload completely?
We're a Super Bowl contender now.
Thanks, Herb. We're looking forward to hearing what the candidates' plans are for getting the Bears back to the top. We'll leave that to them to present the details to us. We don't have a particular...
Crazy that they're going to just start this today. When you knew you were doing this. You should have been talking about this a month ago.
George, given the way that the losses piled up this season and the fact that you have a rookie quarterback and young players, what kept you from dismissing Matt Nagy sooner?
We were evaluating throughout the season. We didn't have any preconceived notions about a particular timeline or a particular timetable. Our evaluation was concluded last night and resulted in the decisions that we announced this morning.
You're playing checkers, not chess.
Hi, George. We haven't gotten to speak with you since the Arlington Heights news broke. I'm just curious, who's in charge of that project for you guys? And I guess what exactly what has to happen next and what does that timeline look like?
Ted Phillips is in charge of that project, and I think the best way to explain it is anybody who's bought a house or a lot to build a house, there's a time between when the property is under contract and closing. And during that time, there are a number of things that need to be done in terms of due diligence, making sure that there's clear title to the house or lot. If it's a lot, determining whether it's a buildable lot and so forth. A lot of regulations that need to be checked out. Well, in a property of this size,
George has no idea about construction.
the time between under contract and closing is vastly expanded. So there's a lot of due diligence that needs to be performed.
And you do.
Before we can close.
Mark Reddy?
Hello, George. Was it your decision, or at least urging, to have Justin Fields take over as the starting quarterback with the Bears when he did this year?
No.
What did you think of the plan this year that Matt Nagy had? Were you all for the idea, the blueprint
Absolutely.
of Andy Dalton potentially being the quarterback the whole year?
I went out of my way to emphasize to Matt that ownership has no interest whatsoever in determining which players play, especially at the quarterback position, and that it's entirely a coaching decision.
Matt Zahn?
George, sort of going back to Mark Podish's question a little bit, I assume a lot of Bears fans out there are not going to be all that pleased that Ted Phillips is still involved in this process, considering the lack of success you guys have had with this structure over the years. Why did you feel the need to not consider maybe changing this structure going forward?
We did talk about what was the best path forward. I don't think there's anything magical about a so-called football czar. At some point, a football person, whether it's the general manager or an executive vice president or a president of football operations, at some point, that person has to report to ownership. And we think with the modification that we've made, we've got the right structure for the Bears going forward.
He just said he is going to be the reason this gets fixed. That's
George, I know you made it clear
bold.
that you're making the final decision. This is your decision. I think we all understand that. Sounds like Bill Polian has a lot of power in this decision. He's been out of the league. He got fired from the Colts 10 years ago. And I know he's still been involved in TV and other things, consulting stuff. Why aren't you just making the decision? Why do you need someone like Bill Polian to kind of guide you here? Because you've been doing this for a while now.
Well, I think it would be a fair criticism if somebody said, I'm going to make this decision all by myself and I'm not going to get any input from anybody else. People would be wondering where this guy is coming from. We have a great resource available to us, and we're going to take full advantage of that resource. I expect that there will be vigorous discussion and debate after we interview each candidate. I was struck in our earliest conversations with Bill how very much on top of the game he is, and even on our situation. When we called him out of the blue and he was asking us detailed questions about our roster, our injury situation with particular players, he was very much up on the game in general and the Bears situation in particular. So I think we'll be in good hands, leaning on Bill to help us make this decision.
Adam Johns?
Hey, George, how would you articulate your current belief in Justin Fields? And then the next part of that, would you like to see him get involved when this reaches maybe the coaching search process? Would you like him to get to know some of these guys before you make that final decision?
Well, I'm just a fan. I'm not a football evaluator. And as a fan, what I see is
You can say that again.
Player with a lot of potential, a lot of ability, a lot of heart, and a strong work ethic. So we're looking for a general manager and a head coach who will develop not just the quarterback position, but the talent around him, and establishing a strong defense to help the quarterback to bring the Bears to success. Justin will not be an active part of the search process, but we'll be very interested to hear from both general manager and head coach candidates what their plan is to get the most out of the quarterback position for us.
Cam Ellis?
George, you guys announced this decision almost simultaneously as players were talking to the media. Was it always the plan to have the players talk before the decision makers about this? And do you think that was the appropriate way to handle it?
I'm sorry, Cam, I don't understand your question about the timing and the players.
Right, like the players were telling us that they had heard about this news, on Twitter. And, do you think that it was appropriate that they speak on the firings before you two did it?
Oh, well, in this day and age, you can't stop things from getting out on social media. We knew that after we informed Matt and Ryan of our decisions, that the likelihood is that it would get out on social media before we put out a statement. But these days, there's not a lot you can do about that.
Andy Seligman?
Yeah, hey, George. Going forward, when it comes to the decision of whether to retain the GM or the coach, will Ted have any involvement in that?
I expect that Ted's advice and counsel will be drawn on, just as it has for many years. But as I said, ultimately, the general manager will report to the chairman, and the decision on the hiring ultimately is mine.
Joe Lewis?
Yeah, hi, George. You mentioned Bill Polian and, the years that he's had. You mentioned yourself. Was there ever, or is there ever a concern or a thought given to possibly having a younger group of, I guess, his consorts looking into a GM and head coach? Because it's not, of course, to, shade your age, but the game has changed since the last time Bill Polian was really active in the league 10 years ago. So was there ever a consideration to perhaps a younger group of people who have been in the league as it's modernized more recently?
Well, I appreciate the spirit of the question, Joseph. Yes, we're not exactly spring chickens, but Bill's been around the game for a long time. He knows the game very well. And I recall George Halas was in his 80s when he made a then very controversial but ultimately successful selection for a head coach. And Bill's much younger than that.
Steve Leventhal?
Yeah, hi, George. This is for you and Ted if he wants to chime in. One of my esteemed colleagues who was on this call wrote an extensive piece analyzing the team over the last couple of years. And one of the core tenets was the dismay that a lot of former players who all have extensive contacts really weren't involved or haven't been consulted. And how come, since you mentioned who your committee is, how come you don't have any former players on that committee?
Well, I would welcome Ted's comments. I'll just say that we love it that our former players feel so strongly about wanting the Bears to be successful. A lot of them are season ticket holders. We welcome their input. I would say as a general proposition, I'm probably more reluctant to seek the feedback of players who or former players who are on media outlets. I don't want to have to put them in the position of deciding what is a confidential conversation and what is okay to share with on the air. We reach out to our former players on a regular basis and look forward to continuing to do that.
Next question, Dan Weeder.
George, how and when did the union with Bill Polian come together for you?
Like I said, I don't recall the exact timing. It was at some point during this past season.
And then moments ago, you made the admission. You said, I'm a fan. I'm not a football evaluator. With that
So why are you
admission
making
made, how can you perform a comprehensive evaluation of your general manager through those sets of lenses?
Well, again, this is a results-oriented business, so it'll be largely wins and losses. making the playoffs.
Yeah, but if you can't identify who the problem is between the GM and then the head coach, the pecking order crumbles.
Pat Finley?
George, have the Bears ruled out playing downtown at a new stadium?
And our exploration of the Arlington Heights project was determined in large part by the seller. This was just a piece of property that was put out for sale. We were contacted by them, we're an agent for them, and we saw this as an outstanding long-term proposition with high potential for the Bears. Meantime, we're happy to engage with the city of Chicago and the Park District about present operations at Soldier Field.
What was the last time that happened, that engagement?
I don't remember. I think it was a few weeks ago.
David Hall? You're muted, David.
Oh, boy.
David, you're muted.
Learn your mute, David.
Sorry about that. Hello, George.
So that was one of the best questions you've ever asked.
Yeah, it's going to get an answer just as good. When you are in the room with these candidates, who is with you, and how do you envision asking these questions of guys who have experience, who maybe have won championships, and that whole process? How would you describe the way it will go?
The people in the room are myself, Ted, Bill, Soup, and Tanisha. We expect a candid and free-flowing conversation. Bill said that when he interviewed Tony Dungy, he knew in the first 12 minutes that Tony was his guy, and they proceeded to talk football for another 8 hours. So we're looking forward to in-depth conversations like that.
Quick follow-up. Did you talk to Tony Dungy and seek his counsel when you moved in this direction?
Anybody else that we may have conferred with in the football world, we're keeping those conversations confidential.
Kevin Fishbane?
A question for Ted. Obviously, Ted, you understand your reputation over the past few seasons in town, and you know, whether it's on here or talk shows, what have you. I'm curious, did you consider bowing out of the coach and GM search? Obviously, I know that there's a change, but did you consider not taking part in it and letting George and Bill and Soup and Tanisha take it from there?
Hi, Kevin. I would say to you that I think the group that we have has different viewpoints, different ways of looking at leadership, different ways of looking at the skill sets of the different candidates. So I think I'm looking forward to it. And my 38 years at the Bears and being involved in a number of these searches, I think I've learned a lot. And I think I have a lot to add going forward.
Well, a quick follow-up then, because there's a question I asked George earlier. How are you individually going to treat this differently in interviews than you have in the past? Because again, you look at the results of the past hires have not gone the way you guys were hoping. So what's going to be different for you in your perspective when you're talking to these prospective GMs and head coaches?
Well, I would say this, that the hiring of Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy, I don't regret that. They both brought a lot to the Bears. Now, ultimately on the field, the results weren't where we wanted to, but I think they've checked a lot of the boxes. You can't ask for better leaders. You can't ask for better forward thinkers.
Oh, boy.
You can't ask for people that gave their all, had great work ethic, were humble. And we're going to look for a lot of those same qualities, and hopefully with Bill's vast expertise in the technicalities of coaching strategy and valuation processes, that's going to add a nice added benefit to our search and going to help us find the right people.
Adam Hogue?
George, I guess coming off actually what Ted just said, I mean, all due respect, at this point, I think the fans just care about winning football games. What you're describing in this process, I have to be honest, sounds a lot like 2015, where it was you and Ted. You guys hired Ernie Accorsi to come in to help you guys, and here we are 7 years later. So
good for you, Hogue.
Why should Bears fans trust that this time, regardless of the people you guys hire and their individual qualities, that it's going to result in wins on the field?
Yeah, Adam, that's the important thing. And I don't think we're going to convince them today, or like I said, perhaps even the day that our next general manager and head coach are introduced. We've got to have results on the field. That's the only thing that matters. And that's when we'll win Bears fans over. Bill Polian talks in his books about decisions he made as a general manager that were considered wildly unpopular at the time, but eventually they bore fruit. And you have to be ready and willing to make what may very well be an unpopular decision if you're convinced it's best for the Bears.
Brad Biggs?
George, as a member of the NFL's diversity committee, is it important for you to make minority hires or a hire for these two openings that you have in the organization?
Brad, I don't think it's a particular obligation just because somebody's on a committee. I think it's a league-wide commitment, and it's a commitment to fairness in the process. What I keep hearing as a member of the diversity committee is that people just want a fair process. It's not a particular result, but as long as people get a fair shake, the same quality interview that another candidate may have gotten, the same opportunity to be heard that every other candidate gets. That's the important part, is the process. We don't know what the result is going to be.
Mark Potash?
Hey, George, when Trestman and Emery were fired, you said that Virginia was pissed off. I was curious, in this latest firing or change, whatever, what impact did Virginia have on this decision, and just how much did that affect you? Her feelings with regard to where the Bears are headed.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. She was consulted, she was conferred with, as was every other member of the Bears board. Everybody wants to win one for her, and we're doing everything we can to make that happen. At one point in our conversations, I asked her for her assessment of our season, and she said, as only a mother can, I'm very, very disappointed.
Jason Leisure?
George, is it your full intention to build a stadium in Arlington Heights if everything goes well with the property? And if so, when do you hope that happens? And same question to Ted as well.
Right now, Jason, all we're doing is exploring the property's potential. We don't even own the property yet, and any questions beyond that would be premature at this point.
But I doubt you're exploring it to build an outlet mall or something. I mean, do you intend to build a football stadium there?
We're exploring the viability of building a football stadium on that property.
And when would you ideally like to see that happen if it does happen? How soon?
Well, we don't have a timetable yet because, as I said, we don't even own the property yet. So it would be sometime after closing before we could make that determination.
Yeah, I can add a little color to that if you want. The closing on the land probably is going to take the rest of this year, maybe into the first quarter of 2023. And at that point in time, we'll decide whether it's financially feasible to try to develop it further. And I think what's important now is that our focus for long-term development is exclusively on that property in Arlington Park.
Alex Shapiro?
Hi, George. You said that evaluating Matt and Ryan was an ongoing process throughout the season, even up to today. I'm wondering, was there any one moment or any one action that really made you say, this is the direction we need to go in?
I don't think so, Alex. Like I said, it's an evaluation of the person's entire body of work. If I could point to particular moments, and this wasn't so much the evaluations of Ryan and Matt themselves, but just where we were and are on the offensive side, I would say in the same calendar year, we twice scored the only touchdown of the game on literally the last play of the game. On the defensive side of the ball, I would point to this season, game one of our defenders fails to touch down a receiver who's on the ground. And in game 17, one of our defenders fails to touch down a receiver who's on the ground.
Dan Weeder?
George, could you offer some insight on, and Ted as well on this question, on how Tanisha and Soup will be valuable resources to these search processes here in the coming weeks?
I think they're going to be great. They're both very excited about the opportunity. Like I said, the primary responsibility for Soup will be, can this person, both the general manager and the head coach, lead these players? And for Tanisha, she's just getting her feet under her in her new role as Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. This will be a great learning experience for her. But these hires are so important that I felt it was important to involve her in the process.
Ted, same
I
question.
would just add to that, you know, I think you guys know Sue Campbell, and he, on a daily basis, is in the locker room talking to the players. What's important? What's on their mind? What's bothering them? What are they happy about? From a whole host of different topics. So I think he will add great insight into how the locker room might react to different styles of coaching, different styles of leadership. So we're looking forward to that. And again, Anisha, she's very bright, and she will help us consider diversity of thought and kind of the implicit bias that a lot of people have when they go through trying to hire leadership, and whether it's a coach or general manager.
Thanks for that. And then for either one of you, with the investment that the organization made last spring in drafting Justin, how do you go about assuring through these simultaneous searches that you wind up with a head coach and general manager combination that allow Justin to reach his full potential?
That'll be part of the challenge. With any general manager or head coaching candidate, we want to know what their plan is for the most important position on the field. How they would utilize Justin, who they would have coaching him, what players would they surround him with, how are they going to maximize his potential to lead the Bears to success.
Jesse Rogers?
George, back to when Justin was named the starter, you mentioned that earlier. Just a couple of days after Matt said Andy would be the starter if he's healthy. Were you involved at least in the conversations with that? What went on during that time? And was there an organizational feeling that there'd be some growing pains if Justin was named the starter? The win-loss record may not look so good.
Matt and I talked about it. At one point, he asked me what I thought. And I said, I'm uncomfortable that you're even asking me the question. That's a coaching decision. And that's how we left it.
Zach Pearson.
Hey George, when you guys are in the room evaluating candidates, whether it be head coach or general manager, for you, does it make a candidate more intriguing if he's had a previous connection to the franchise? I know it won't be the biggest difference maker or anything like that, but would it make him a little more intriguing?
I tried to say in my opening remarks as exhaustively as I could that we weren't going to limit the search, and whether a person has a Bears background or not would not disqualify a candidate.
Pat Finley.
George, last time you and Ted conducted interviews without a football guy with you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you talked to a couple of coaches right before you hired Ryan, correct, to take advantage of that 1 week period. What did you learn from that experience, and what can you tell Bears fans that would lead them to believe that the results will be better than they were the last time?
Well, like I said, Pat, I don't think we're going to convince him in the short term. It's only time that will bear out the results. And the charge to us will be finding the best general manager and head coach to bring about those results.
Nick Mariano.
Hey, George, what new roles will be created in the front office? Is there any interest in creating a research and strategy department?
Thank you, Nick. That'll be something that we'll have to discuss with the general manager and the head coaching candidates. And once they're hired, see what of those plans they want to implement.
Dan Pompey.
Hey, George, do you have an identity for the Chicago Bears in mind that you would like to promote with your hires?
Tough, gritty, smart, opportunistic, winning football.
Colleen King.
Hi, this question is for Ted regarding Arlington. Understanding there's still a long way to go in the process, what is the vision for the project, and what makes it an attractive possibility for you guys?
Hi, Colleen. It's as George pointed out, we didn't go to try to pursue this property that came available, but it is 326 acres. It's a extremely unique property. There's nothing else like it in Chicagoland. So the opportunities, we haven't even begun to envision what it could be. But we're hopeful that if we close, that we'll be, moving forward with turning it into a wonderful destination site. Again, timing of it, we don't know because we haven't even closed on the land. And if we don't close on the land, then all that vision won't come to fruition. But we're excited. It can be an entertainment destination of with multiple facets to it that I think could really help put Arlington Heights on the map as a destination spot.
Andy Seligman.
George, if Ted is involved in the search and in the decision to, going forward in terms of whether to retain the GM or not, or the coach or not, then how much is really changing here in terms of the operational structure?
Well, the change in the interview room is that we've got 3 new people in the room. So we've got the benefit of their perspective. Organizationally, it remains to be seen how much is going to change because I haven't had a general manager report to me. So I've got a lot to learn in that regard, and counting on the new general manager to help me along in that process.
Adam Johns.
Hey, George, to go back to Justin Fields a little bit, given the investment in him, giving up the first-round pick this year and whatnot, if a candidate says that he doesn't like him, doesn't want to keep him, wants to move on, would that automatically discount them or disqualify them from the position of GM or coach?
Great question.
Interesting.
Well, I think I've said before, I don't entertain hypotheticals. We're interested in hearing what the candidates have to say about the development of the entire football organization, and especially the quarterback position. We want to know what their plan is to develop that position for us.
David Hall?
Or just to follow up on that, because I think that's a critical question. I think what we're asking is, it's not a hypothetical. If the candidate, you're a fan and you say that you like what you see in Justin Fields, but if somebody who is a football person that you're interviewing, a head coach candidate or a GM, has reservations about his potential, does that potentially disqualify that person from getting a job with you?
Well, I don't want to get into a semantics debate with you, but the first word of your question was if. That to me presents a hypothetical. And we don't know what the candidates have had to say because we haven't interviewed any of them yet. We want to know what their plan is for that position for the Bears.
Is thinking Justin Fields can be a franchise quarterback a prerequisite for either the general manager or the head coach of the Bears?
We want to know what their plan is for the quarterback position for the Bears.
Pat Finley?
Hi, this question's for Ted. Ted, last year at this, you said, have we won enough games? No. Or have we gotten the quarterback situation completely right? No. Have we won enough games? No. But everything else is there. Do you still believe that?
Yeah, I do.
Well, clearly we weren't happy with the results. So we need to get better. And I think as George pointed out, besides the fact that the general manager is going to report to him, which is a big change, we're going to look to the general managers to structure his personnel department in a way that he feels he has enough support and enough expertise so that he can not only oversee the coaching, the head coach, but also his personnel department, and to be able to ultimately set, along with the head coach, plans for each player and to hold the coach accountable for the schemes that he develops. So that's what I think we need to do going forward.
Brad Biggs?
George, from your position, what happened during Thanksgiving week? You guys were in a real tough patch. That firestorm sort of erupted. In retrospect, could the club have handled that differently, or should it have been handled differently?
Yeah, thank you, Brad. The way I viewed that situation, a reporter who doesn't normally cover the Bears put out an erroneous report, attributing it to one unnamed source, and called us to ask for comment only after the story had been posted. It was on a website that before that day I had never heard of.
Ooh.
We discussed it internally and decided that as long as we addressed it internally, I didn't feel any particular obligation to address an erroneous report publicly. My concern was it just seemed to be thrown out there to see what our reaction was. And that if you deny that report or refute that report, and you don't deny or refute the next erroneous report, people attach some significance to that. Ted and I talked to Ryan and Matt about it that day. I spoke to the team about it the next day. If I had to do it all over again, I would have spoken to Ryan and Matt about it even sooner and spoken to the team even sooner. But as long as we addressed it internally, I didn't feel any need to address it publicly.
Adam Hogue?
George, Olin Kreutz told a story the other day about how the Bears offered him essentially somewhat of a consulting role with the offensive line for $15 an hour. Were you aware of that offer when it happened, and what was your reaction whenever you were aware of it?
I've learned over the years to take just about anything that Olin says with a grain of salt, and I look forward to hearing that story again and hope he includes it in his Hall of Fame induction speech.
So you're saying that it's not true?
That's the way it is sometimes with Olin. Don't get the whole story. And Olin knows what the story is.
Kevin Fishbane?
Wow.
George, you said earlier that when Matt went to about talking to you about quarterback, you were uncomfortable talking football with him. Should you at this point in your time as chairman be comfortable talking about football? And do you see in the future getting to a juncture where as the person ultimately in charge of this football team to be able to be involved in those conversations?
I didn't say that I was uncomfortable talking football with Matt. I love talking football with Matt and with Ryan and with all of our football people. That's what makes this game great. I said that I was uncomfortable that Matt was even asking my opinion about who should be the starting quarterback of the Chicago Bears, because that is entirely a coaching decision.
Dan?
George, realistically, how deep do you envision the lists for each of these jobs, general manager and head coach, of candidates to be?
Great question, Dan. I don't know. Expect lengthy lists for both positions, and we're going to work through them and get the best person at each position for the Bears.
At the outset, you said that there would be the potential of, if there was a can't-miss head coaching candidate, that you would move to secure that person before hiring a general manager. What would the criteria be, what boxes that would be checked that would make you move in that fashion to secure a coach before you hired a general manager?
If his name is Jim Harbaugh.
We'll know him when we see him.
Okay, we have time for a couple more. Pat Finley?
George, a version of this was asked earlier, but I'm going to try again. A connection to the Bears, whether it's somebody who you know personally or who your family's had a relationship with, would that give you some sense of comfort in making a hire with somebody that you know versus somebody that?
Oh my God, Pat! You might as well just throw away the question.
It would depend, Pat, on who that person was and what their vision was for the Bears.
Is water wet? Like, come on, man.
Last question, Mark Potash.
Pat.
Hey, George, after Ryan and Matt did not work out, does that alter the value you place on nice guys who get along and collaborate? You know, are you any more likely now to hire some no-nonsense hard guy who
Greg, this is a big
might ruffle
question.
some feathers but gets results? In other
This is
words,
the problem.
is it time to think a little more outside the box and hire someone who might want to do some things that aren't exactly your style or this organization's style?
They won't do it.
Ryan and Matt weren't hired because they're nice guys. And,
Yes, they were.
We're not looking for a particular personality type. It's who can best lead the Bears to success.
But the idea that they collaborated and you know that they got along and so yeah, why did that not work out? That was the value you put in it, which is a big reason why they stayed last year. Why did that not work out?
Well, I think if you look around the league, you'll see various instances of dysfunction, and that relationship between the general manager and the head coach is absolutely critical. In our conversations with Bill Polian, he's told us it's that relationship between the general manager and the head coach, and the relationship between the head coach and the quarterback that will determine the success of your team. So we don't want somebody that's always agreeing with each other. We want vigorous debate, but at the end of the debate, we want people breaking on the plan and united behind the vision.
All right, George and Ted, thanks for your time. Appreciate everyone joining the call.
Thank you. Go Bears.
Man, oh man.
That will wrap up the portion of. Let me make sure I'm getting this out of here. Let me check on Trae. See how he's doing, but yeah, that was an interesting thing, and we can try to decipher. There was a lot there, so I've been unable to pull up the comments while I was I got a lot of messages coming in now all of a sudden, but
Olin already responded to George. That's what everybody's going crazy about.
Okay, what was the response? Because I can read it unless you have it here.
No, I got it.
Jordan?
Unreal, but I can't say I'm shocked is my response. Haven't talked to George since I left Hallis Hall, but he knows me well. Crazy response by him.
Crazy.
But he knows me. But he knows me well. Is sarcastic. Like, hey, I haven't talked to him since I left Hallis, but yeah, he knows me well.
Yeah, definitely a shot at Olin Kreutz. He took a few shots. He took a shot at the reporter that reported that Matt Nagy was told he was going to be out around Thanksgiving. So there's a lot to decipher here with George McCaskey. I'm at a loss because, last year, a lot of his explanations of why it would work with Ryan and Matt didn't make a lot of sense and rang hollow. And now his explanations of why they don't need a president of football operations and why this new somewhat restructuring of how they're going to do the pecking order of who checks who here. Mark Potash made a great point within this press conference saying, you've admitted you're a fan, but how do you, maybe it wasn't Mark, but I know Mark hit him with some good ones. How can you say that, if you're an admitted fan first, how are you the one that can really check the GM? And he says, well, it's a results-driven business, so I look at the wins and losses. But as we've learned with Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy, how do you know that it wasn't who's to blame? If you're just checking the GM and the GM is checking the head coach, what if it's the head coach that is the reason why the GM looks bad? And you'll never know that because all you're doing is checking the GM. And then to expand on that whole pecking order a little further, they said, well, then who checks you? And that was Mark Potash's question. You've been here 11 years and it's a results-driven business and you can't say that you've done well in your job. So who's checking you? Well, the board is checking me. Well, as he revealed at the end, his mom is on the board.
Yep.
My mom is really nice to me too. So, it doesn't
99-year-old mother.
Yeah,
I'm disappointed.
Exactly.
I'm disappointed in you.
I'm disappointed, George. You better get better, but I still love you. And there's other McCaskies on that board. And it's just the structure is still in place. And that's not a good thing.
No.
Because this culture structure needed a change. And I have to laugh at him trying to talk about how it works to buy a house and how you build a house. This dude has no idea how to build a house. Okay. I'm a bricklayer. I know how to build a house. And this guy is just lost, when it comes to, if you want to talk about how to build a house, the guy that makes the blueprints has an idea of how to build a house. You're laying the blueprint out for your foundation and you do not know how to build a house. That's a problem. That's why you need a president of football operations in there ahead of the GM to oversee the GM and the head coach. If you're just looking at the GM and the GM is looking at the head coach, you don't have someone to oversee it all. Then you, as the owner, can then oversee the president of football operations, the head coach, and the GM. his explanation towards that completely rang hollow, made absolutely no sense whatsoever. I've just texted Trae, and he was helping his mom out. So yeah, he's driving en route to his mother to help jump her car. Something's going on with her car. Wasn't by the house. So Trae will no longer be a part of the rest of this stream. Maybe we can go live later tonight with Trae once he gets all his ducks in a row. But unfortunately, Trae can't make it for the rest of the stream. His mom is doing some things. And no, Will, I am not scared, okay? But we have been running for 2 hours here, and I know where you're going with all of this. So I feel like, Will, I love you, but I feel like your ranting and raving is better served for when Trae and I are on together later on, and we can all have fun and go crazy. Jordan, if you don't know Will, he's a special guy. And this is Will here holding his participation trophy, and he's a fiery one, and he's very opinionated, and I love Will, but I'm not going for 4 hours today. Okay. So we've already gone 2. We did the first hour of kind of reacting to the news. Now we're going to, Jordan and I are going to react to the press conference, and then we're going to put a bow on this thing. But, I've kind of had my initial thoughts on this. I'm trying to piece everything together from what I've just heard. Jordan, what was your reaction to what we heard from owner George McCaskey and a little bit from Ted Phillips?
Sure, Greg. And like I said, we can go as long as you want. I'm here for you. I appreciate you having me on. So, I mean, let's just start with this. The simple basis of it is the same old song, same old routine, same old bad news bears. And I know that sounds doom and gloom, but it's just the truth. And I'm going to give a little bit of sunshine. I have like the God rays behind me. Sorry about that. Give a little bit of sunshine to the situation, which is nothing more than chance. But I also want to be optimistic, which is to say a dead clock is right twice a day.
Exactly. So, as I've said before, and I said it, we're going to have to hope they get lucky.
Yeah.
Because at this point, you're right. Nothing has changed. And that's why it is a desperation for me that they get Jim Harbaugh, because then at least I can trust his resume and his football acumen to get this fixed in spite of the structure. I mean, the Bulls, they pushed John Paxson up. He's still a part of the Bulls organization, and Jerry Reinsdorf is still the owner. And they've become a successful franchise. Jerry Reinsdorf also has, Michael Jordan and 6 NBA championships underneath his belt. So, he's got a little more standing here in the city of Chicago. But at the same time, they were a failure for 20 years, and they got it right with Arturis and Mark Eversley. But it takes a little luck. And at this point, we're going to have to hope for luck. Some of the things I heard today, not being just today is day one of your evaluation on who your GM and head coach is. That's a huge concern. You should already be well ahead of this. They did this at the end of last year, too, where George claims that he didn't make a decision on Matt Nagy or Ryan Pace until after the season was over. You should be evaluating all the way throughout the season. And if you couldn't see this by the Browns game, and then if you still couldn't see this by the Ravens game, and if you still couldn't see this into December, where we've had multiple more embarrassments from this team, it took you all the way until the end of the year to come to this conclusion. Meanwhile, you have other teams like the Raiders getting or whoever getting a head start on who they're going to, the Jacksonville Jaguars, getting a head start on who they're going to hire. And we're just starting today, day one. That scares me. And that also tells me, just as far as his thought process on how this evaluation will go and this interview process is going to go, the likelihood of Jim Harbaugh being the head coach of the Bears is slim now after what I've heard from George McCaskey to say. And that disappoints me greatly, but that's basically what I heard today.
I hate to burst your bubble, Greg, but Jim's not coming.
I agree.
It's just not going to happen, man. Like, it's a scenario where you look at it, and let me be clear, I'm not an NFL executive. I couldn't even hold a candle to Bill Polian, I'm sure. But Bill Polian's 80 years old. He hasn't been in the league for over 10 years. His greatest accomplishment is getting lucky and drafting Peyton Manning instead of Ryan Leaf. Did they have some hits? Sure. As I'm trying to go back and jog my memory, they had Bob Sanders, they had Gary Brackett, Dwight Freeney, Robert Mathis. So they had a few hits. But the guy hasn't been in the league for over 10 years. His last effort was as a TV analyst, and he failed in the AAF expansion league. And that's who you bring in. You could bring in anybody. And I know that they worked with Tony Dungy. Tony Dungy, I actually respect his opinion, but, again, that's just another sign that it's the good old boys club. You'd rather elevate Bill Polian and ask him to. You were bringing it up about how he's a fan, he doesn't know anything, so how is he going to understand it? Well, the idea is his president of football operations for the time being is Bill Polian. And Bill Polian's the guy that wants Lamar Jackson.
But just like Ernie Accorsi, he doesn't really have the skin in the game because he's not actually hired and a permanent employee of the Bears. So he's just giving advice. And then when the Bears take his advice, then he walks off into the sunset to never have to take any true accountability if this doesn't go right. Ernie Accorsi, suggested we get Ryan Pace and John Fox. It's
when I see somebody saying like, why do I say Harbaugh is a slim chance? And here's the reason why. And it's a real big. If you've noticed, Greg, I told you this is a real big question that Brad Biggs was asking about the reality of, hey, what is the situation with you hiring good guys? And they said, no, we didn't hire Nagy, we didn't hire Pace because they were good guys. They kept them around because they were good guys, because they were likable, impressionable figures.
Right.
And this is to answer Brian V. Ficker's question. The reason Jim or Brian Flores, for example, are not coming to Chicago is because they're hard asses. They demand respect. They set the tone. They're culture setters. Just look at the way that they treat Olin. Olin's a little bit of a rigid figure. Doesn't always flow the right way. Doesn't always juke and jive the way that they want to. Do you really think Jim Harbaugh is going to do that? It's not going to happen.
He's going to come up there and ruffle feathers, and they don't want that. They want everyone to agree with each other. He kind of alluded at the end like, oh, we don't have to agree on everything. But the proof is in the pudding. You want guys that are yes men, that are going to everybody love everybody. That's why you hired Trestman. That's why you hired Matt Nagy.
Greg, look at who they're interviewing. Did you see it? The first interview's out already. It's going to be Leslie Frazier. Another good guy. Nothing against Leslie Frazier. He's an awesome guy, I'm sure. But that's just another sign. This is the bad news bears that we all know. It's comfort. Leslie's a good guy. He's soft-spoken. He's defensive instead of offensive. He's established. He's not new. Everything that's opposite of Nagy. But he still is a very comfortable figure for us. He has Bears history. That's our guy. I hate to say it, trust me, you know me, I think. I'm Harbaugh first, Flores.
And we've already seen Leslie Frazier fail in this division with Minnesota, and they're going to immediately, if they do hire him, call him a leader of men. And as Shane pointed out on Twitter, like 11 guys got arrested on Lake Minnetonka under Leslie Frazier's watch. So it's, today, the firings this morning were like the good news. And then the press conference today was bad news. And George didn't give anyone any kind of sense of relief that this is going to get right. And then he pawns it off by saying, well, I'm not going to be able to convince anybody until the results. Yeah. So we can't criticize the press conference. We can't criticize the hirings or the hiring process. We all just have to wait it out until the results are here. And then year one comes around, results don't come around. They'll be like, well, we have to give this time, like Matt Nagy tried to say, oh, it takes 4 years, And so then there is no end to the excuse train. And I'm just so tired of the excuse train. It bothers me to no end. I agree. Taco agrees. I don't know if he's got some breaking news, but he said, am I going to be on Twitch more than I lost my job today? I don't know if he talked to Petey, but I hope I didn't lose my job. But he is asking about Brian Flores. And I think that does become more of a real possibility when you hear how this interview process is going to go. They certainly aren't acting like it. Maybe they're just trying to hold their cards close to the vest in regards to Jim Harbaugh. But the way the interview process is being described does not sound like to me that Jim Harbaugh is going to be the next head coach of the Chicago Bears. But a guy like Brian Flores does line up.
I know he does.
You don't think he does?
No, because tell me why Polian wants that guy. That's the issue.
Well, we don't know how he feels one way or another. I don't know if it necessarily means the head coach has to have a tie to Bill Polian. Obviously, Bill's going to recommend guys that he likes, that he knows personally. But at the same time, I do think a guy like Brian Flores could wow them in the interview process, from everything you said before the McCaskey interview and what other people are saying about him on Twitter. Then you also consider how diligent and how serious George McCaskey is going to take the inclusion. He kept bringing up the new role.
I do think that's important.
Inclusion and being on the committee board when it comes to, fairness for black head coaches to be able to get a fair shake and a proper interview process, the same interview process a guy like, Jim Harbaugh or whoever would get, Josh McDaniels, whoever, maybe he comes in here and wows them, and that's, maybe that's who, maybe that's where it goes. I don't know. At this point, it just seems clear to me that Jim Harbaugh will not be the head coach, but at the same time, we have to let this all now play out and see where it goes. But only last year's press conference was worse than what I heard today.
Yeah.
George McCaskey is asleep at the wheel. He doesn't understand accountability. He doesn't understand true accountability for him or for Ted. He cares about the money. He's not worried. He wants to talk about results-driven business, but he doesn't want to put the ownership on the results he's produced, on the results Ted Phillips has produced, and then act like he's going to be the one to oversee this stuff. And we're all supposed to trust that process as if it's going to be something that is going to work out. We have to hope that they get lucky. And that, is sad. It's a sad reality, but that is absolutely where we stand right now.
Well, and let me be clear. If I'd be rooting for you. If they hired Brian Flores, don't get me wrong. I told you Harbaugh's my guy, but I really mean it when I say Flores is like an inch below that. So I'd be on cloud nine if they hired Flores. But in regards to the press conference today, I think what's important to note, and I really want to give George credit where it's due. The one thing I will give him credit for is he did step out of his comfort zone a little and fire Pace. But unfortunately, we're also seeing the double-sided edge of that, which is to say he is not comfortable enough cutting somebody that's been there 38 years. And that's the ugly head that's rearing itself today. He went a half measure. We'll go ahead and cut Nagy and Pace, but I can't let go of Phillips.
Yep.
And that's the issue. And we're just running in a scenario here where the last thing I want to say, I don't know when you got to wrap up, but I just think this is a critical point. I know there's a lot of people that hated Pace. I actually was kind of floundering on it. I think he had some valuable things that he added to the organization, but he's gone now. It's fine. Let's move on. The issue that I have, and I really want people to focus on this because this happened with Nagy, with Mitch, which I do think it absolutely can happen, is you bring in a GM, and that GM's just going to, and it's sure, we can hope that they find somebody that says Justin Fields is the guy that I want, but you will say a lot of strange things to get a job that's one of 32.
Yep.
And Nagy came in and said he would be the QB whisperer and he would make Mitch a star to get that job. And as soon as he came in, he threw Mitch under the bus week 2 of the first year against Seattle. Right before the game was saying he had to limit his playbook because Mitch couldn't understand it. I am so fearful you're going to hire a GM that goes, yeah, Justin Fields the guy. And then come draft time, they're going, oh, Desmond Ridder looks good. Or, maybe we'll start flirting with other QBs because Justin Fields isn't my type of guy. And that is the only reason that I had to redeem to say keep Pace. And it's fine, he's out now. But you want to talk about like the biggest decision to make. Yes, it'd be nice to hire the right coach. Yes, it'd be nice to hire the right GM. But if they do not find a guy that lines with Justin Fields and says, no, that's truly the guy I want, we're starting over fresh completely.
Yeah. And it's a valid question to George because, when they were doing the interview process before for a head coach, when Jay Cutler was here, they interviewed a head coach that said, I don't want Jay Cutler here. The first thing I'm going to do, I think it was Chris Ballard actually as the GM. He said, if you hire me, Jay Cutler's gone. And they said, okay, you're disqualified from joining here because we're keeping Jay Cutler because of the contract he's under. So it is a valid question as far as, the decision making. Now, you would hope that who we bring here believes in Justin and knows how to get the most out of him. But at the same time, if you're going to hire the best of the best and there shouldn't be any bias behind that decision and he doesn't believe in Justin, well, then you're going against you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. You would think with, the intangibles and the smarts and everything that Justin brings, that it's not going to be too hard to find somebody that says, yeah, that is a top candidate that says I can get the most out of Justin. But it was a very valid question. I do have to shout out, because there's been a lot of different talk until last night. Twitter had its hair on fire.
Yeah.
But I do got to shout out DeBear's blog because, this guy, his name's Jeff Hughes.
Yes.
And there he is in between me and Jake at just before the Bears playoff game in 2018 against the Eagles. And we ran into him at the gate. But, he had a lot on this story here over the last few weeks, over the last few days, and then going into last night. And, there's one thing, and I know you're new to what I do on Twitter, but I did point out, and I know you reacted to it, but, when it comes to disagreeing on subject, I don't block or mute very many people, and I really don't have a problem with any kind of sports debate as long as it doesn't get personal. We can agree. We don't have to agree. We can fuck with each other and everything else. But then when the pot shots become personal, personal attacks, that's where I draw a line. And, a lot of people don't like the Bears blog because he's, his delivery or how he carries himself, whatever, he's a New York, he's from New York. And, he's just got a different way about how he handles himself on Twitter and everything else. But at the same time, I enjoy he's doing this day in and day out covering the Bears. He obviously knows somebody because of the things he puts out there. You don't have to agree with him all the time. You can challenge him when he's wrong about Allen Robinson's contract or, whatever. If you love him and you want to sing his praises about the things he's right, so be it. There's a lot of other different people out on the internet or on Twitter that do the same kind of shtick. And Jeff's been doing it for a long time here. And he's a part of Bears Twitter. We all want the same thing. We all want a Bears Super Bowl, but we all treat each other like shit most of the time, which I find pretty funny. I try to keep it light. I have people that come at me with some visceral attacks, personal attacks. I try for the most part to not take it personally, but at the same time, you have to draw a line. When I was joking around like last night about who we should sacrifice, in order to get Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy fired, a lot of people were keeping it light, keeping it funny, as it should be. I just want to have fun with this. It's sports. I'm 35 years old. I have a 3-year-old here at home. That's much more important to me than anything that we could talk about on Twitter. So to go on there and get personal and get nasty towards each other, to me is pointless. But at the same time, like I said, when we were talking about the sacrifice, who we're going to sacrifice, a lot of personal shots towards Jeff.
Yes, there were.
About how he looks, about it's silliness. And we're all adults here. There's some kids on Twitter, but a lot of us that are doing all the talking are adults. And some of us need to start acting like it. As far as I'm concerned, not, different strokes for different folks, but that's all I'm going to say in that regard. But I do have to shout out Jeff once again from the Bears blog. He got a lot right. And this was some of the stuff that Jeff said. He put out a little, article earlier, and he said, I've been pretty locked in on the thinking of Bears ownership over the last few months, actually working a few friends harder than I normally would for information. And here are the fruits of those labors. And he said, Matt Nagy began to fall out of favor with ownership this summer. George McCaskey and Ted Phillips shared my outrage with how the quarterback position was being handled. George was physically moved to see Justin Fields receive a standing ovation at a preseason game and could not understand why Nagy, and to a lesser degree Pace, were skewing that enthusiasm to play a journeyman quarterback. Despite what has been reported, George never instructed Nagy to play Fields, but he did almost weekly ask why Fields wasn't playing. The problem? Nagy's answers never held water. When the coach would resort to tired phrases about the kid not being quote-unquote ready, the owner wanted to know what that actually meant. Nagy could never communicate that effectively. The Bears decided to fire Nagy before Thanksgiving, but never entertained the idea of firing him in season. Nagy never lost the locker room. The team constantly played with effort. The Bears are comfortable waiting until the season is over. Nagy was not told that week. On the Patch Report, the same source tried to leak the story to many journalists and non-journalists like me. We vetted it. It had no merit. The Bears were furious about the story getting traction, and they still can't believe they face criticism for a bullshit story. The decision to fire Ryan Pace was far more complicated and took far longer. Some highlights. The Bears, through back channels, used a series of consultants to evaluate the whole of their football operation. Bill Polian was involved. Tony Dungy was involved. In the early stages of that process, the recommendation was veering towards only replacing Pace if they could land an established GM. But at the conclusion of the process, the formal recommendation was for the Bears to move on. Ozzie Newsome was approached about a formal role in the organization. He chose to remain retired. The Bears put out feelers to both Kevin Colbert and John Schneider, gauging potential availability and interest. I, being Jeff Hughes from the Bears blog, I honestly don't know the outcomes of those feelers, but Colbert is retiring from the Steelers after this coming draft. The Bears have been pretty definitively firing Pace for a few weeks, but it became official last Wednesday. Polian helped compile a list of a dozen GM candidates, and those meetings will begin immediately. I do not know what his involvement will be in the coming weeks. So Jeff is all over this.
Yes, he is.
And, for, guys like Dan Wiederer, who talk about bloggers versus real beat reporters and the death of the expert and, keeping score about, the official beat writers and then bloggers and podcasters such as myself saying things or reporting things. Well, if we're keeping score, Jeff nailed this one. And, at the Bears blog, you can like him, love him, hate him, leave him, whatever you want. But he's a part of Bears Twitter, and he does bring something to the table. And that, in my opinion, can't be said for everybody on Bears Twitter. So, maybe let's leave the personal shots out about looks and things of that nature. And let's just, keep score, as Dan Wiederer likes to say, and, score one for Jeff from the Bears blog. And I'll leave it at that. What your reaction to any of those reports from Jeff Hughes from the Bears blog?
No, I think Jeff is a valuable resource in Bears Twitter. And admittedly, Greg, you're not going to love hearing this, but I think I've been muted by Jeff. I wish I knew the reason. He and I had a few disputes back and forth, but I'm opinionated as much as he is in a lot of Bears Twitter. But I think you noticed I commented on your who'd you sacrifice, and I think I replied with like Jermaine Ifedi, and if it had to be somebody meaningful in 2022 and beyond, it was Eddie Jackson. But I think if we could try to keep it civil, and I know that's hard on the Bird app, but the reality is that Jeff Hughes provides a lot of valuable insight. I also think as much as, again, I don't know why I was muted by him, but he does answer a lot of people's questions, and we'll even kind of divvy back and forth with you if you have a disagreement or you want to argue a little bit. I think you pretty much put a good bow on it, but I think Jeff Hughes scored one for him because I think was it the Irish Bears show? He called all this out.
Yep. He broke it on the Irish Bears show, and shout out to those guys. They invited me on their watch party show they did yesterday during the Bears game, and was able to kind of, distribute some of my thoughts, shake the cobwebs a little bit, Jordan, because I've been in hiatus. I've been doing a lot of, you see over my shoulder the Purdue basketball jersey. I'm fully immersed in basketball right now, whether it be Purdue basketball or Bulls basketball, because it's much more palatable to attend, as far as Braggs in the Stands is concerned, or talk about via streams or podcast shows. And I look forward to the basketball season continuing and looking forward to seeing where this goes for the Chicago Bears, but a little discouraged, I should say, even more than a little discouraged, very discouraged by, some of the things I heard from George McCaskey today. The guy, is in a complete state of denial when it comes to his accountability or Ted's accountability to this team, in complete state of denial of how the pecking order works and why it is completely flawed and why it continues to fail him, because the pecking order, in my opinion, is not correctly structured. But at the same time, they can get lucky. So we'll have to hope for that. At the end of the day, for this culture to truly change completely, aside from a miracle happening with the GM and head coach, home run, Hall of Fame hires, is that the McCaskies eventually have to sell this team. And, I don't like saying that. I've met George a few times. I know he's a passionate Bears fan. I've watched him walk through the parking lots at South Lot. I've watched him walk around training camps and greet Bears fans and be the face of the organization in a certain way. But at the same time, George McCaskey isn't George Halas. And this isn't, he brought up George Halas making a hire that no one was very controversial and Mike Ditka, and it ended up working out. It ain't 1980 anymore. It's not 1970. It's not, you're not winning. They're not called NFL championships anymore. It's about winning Super Bowls. And the Bears have only won one of those. And that was with a revolutionary defense in the 85 Bears. And I don't think they're knocking down that door anytime soon. But, to me, my hope or dream to get this culture completely changed, the Cubs, they needed ownership to change. They were owned by the Tribune Company, and then the Ricketts came in. The Ricketts understood at the time that they needed a correct pecking order structure, brought Theo Epstein in, who got Jed Hoyer in, who got Joe Madden in, who then, brought all these up along with Chris Bryant, Anthony Rick. That's how it's done. Did it work out completely for the Cubs? No, but they got the job done, and I'll fucking take it. The Bears, on the other hand, do not understand how this structure works. And at the end of the day, maybe it's when, he did say, and I know for a fact that this is something that George is desperate about, and that's winning Virginia a Super Bowl before she dies. She's 99. Yeah, so a lot of his decisions, that's what scares me, is a lot of his decisions are predicated on how can I get Virginia a Super Bowl how can I get my mom a Super Bowl before she passes away? That's why he didn't fire Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy last year. He's like, I don't want to start over. My mom's 98 years old. And if we just get the quarterback right, we're going to be right back in the playoffs, because we were in the playoffs this year and the quarterback sucked. So if we just get the quarterback right, then we'll be in the playoffs and then everything will be okay and we'll have a shot to win a Super Bowl for my mom. And totally being blinded by the idea that he's got all these other problems around that aren't the quarterback. The same thing when we just need a kicker. If we just get a kicker, then everything's going to be fixed. We don't have to worry about anything else, because the kicker was the reason we didn't win the playoffs this year. And so we're going to focus on the kicker, and we're going to hold, huge, crazy kicker competitions. And now we got the kicker right. Now we don't have anything else right. So now it's okay. The coach, if we just get the coach right, then we're going to be, we have the right pieces in place. We got Khalil Mack. We got Robert Quinn. We've got talent around. Roquan Smith and David Montgomery never gave up this year. So if I just get the right coach, then I'll be able to win my mom the big one before she passes away. He's putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound consistently. Yep. So whack-a-mole. So exactly, whack-a-mole. A sinking ship. He's plugging one hole and water shooting out the other. Whatever, however you want to compare it. But that's what it is. And, it's not likely that he's going to win one for his mom before he passes away. I hate saying that. I ain't got no ill will towards Virginia McCaskey, but it's not likely, short of some miracle. So at the end of the day, my hope is that, once Virginia McCaskey passes away, that George, sees the value of this franchise with the upcoming new stadium at Arlington Heights potentially being done, and takes that money and runs with it and sells this team off, and we get a new ownership in that understands that there needs to be a structure and a pecking order that holds each other accountable, and not a board of directors that includes their mother that's going to give them excuses. And then that will be the day, Sylvie's been begging for it for years. It starts at the top. Well, when the top is mom and son and best buddy all checking each other, you can't expect too much accountability. So unfortunately, we've cut off our nose to spite our face with Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, just like we cut off our nose to spite our face by getting rid of Mitch Trubisky and bringing in Justin Fields. But more times than not, those little Band-Aid fixes aren't going to fix the overall problem. So I'm a Bears fan. I'm going to wake up tomorrow a Bears fan. I'm going to go to training camp next year as a Bears fan, try to give everyone here that enjoys what I do here at Braggs in the Stands the same kind of coverage I always do. I'm going to go to week 1 and go to all the home games, as far as I can. This year I stopped after Halloween because I couldn't take it anymore. But I will continue to go to the games and be the fan in the stands and share these ups and downs along with you, because unfortunately we're in the journey together, and if it works out great, they're going to need a lot of luck, but I'm not going to hold my breath after what I heard today with George McCaskey. I'm just not.
I wouldn't suggest
I guess I'm getting cynical in my old age. I'm an eternal optimist. At the end of the day, I'm going to continue to hold out hope that Jim Harbaugh comes to the Chicago Bears, but after hearing what George said today, definitely doesn't seem likely. So, it's just a lot of hoping and dreaming and praying for luck. That's where we're at right now as Bears fans, and that's disappointing to say the least. Jordan, any final thoughts from you before I cut you loose and then I put a bow on this baby?
No, I really appreciate it. I guess I'll say one thing. I know there was a couple questions about why is this guy so high on Brian Flores?
Answer away. You the floor is yours if you want to answer any final questions and then give your final thoughts.
Sure thing. I'll be real quick.
No, you're good. Take your time.
As far as Brian Flores, and this is not going to be popular. I don't care. One thing you'll know about me if you spend any time on Twitter, I have my own opinion. It is what it is. I'm willing to listen to the idea of change, but I love Lovie Smith. I know he's not a popular figure. I think that we did Lovie quite wrong. I think Brian Flores resembles Lovie Smith in a lot of ways, and actually more Mike Tomlin, to be quite frank. I touched earlier about his scheme and things of that sort, but I will leave Bears fans in the chat with a couple staff lists, if you will. I think personally, if we're on the same board, Greg, that Jim's not coming, then my next best stance is having GM Rick Smith. Rick Smith is the former Houston GM, drafted Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson is somewhat similar of a player to Justin Fields. I think that's a good fit. You bring in head coach Brian Flores, defensive guy, get that defense right, runs a exotic scheme that is not the standard too high Fangio scheme that everybody's running, and it's not the middle of the field closed cover 3 Pete Carroll scheme that we've seen. You bring in Brian Flores' biggest issue is offensive staff. I think that you bring in Joe Brady there. I know that sounds wild because people see that he was fired and they think that Joe Brady's some trash offensive coordinator. They scapegoated Joe Brady. I think his scheme is diverse. You saw what he did with Joe Burrow, the guy that literally had to transfer out of Ohio State because he couldn't beat out Justin Fields. And you put Joe Brady with Justin Fields, a young, innovative offensive coordinator, pair him to Justin Fields and see if it doesn't explode. As far as your special teams coordinator, whoever you want to hire, I do think that an offensive line coach is important. The moment that they let Harry Hiestand go, that was a big issue. If there was any way to lure Andy Heck away from Kansas City, that would be the guy I'd want to hire. In regards to the Harbaugh people, because I know those people exist and that story's not going away, I'll quickly end with this. GM, I'd probably go Jeff Ireland. Says it's a dream to be a Chicago Bear GM. So we'll go Jeff Ireland. Head coach, Jim Harbaugh. Offensive coordinator, Pep Hamilton. Pep Hamilton is the guy that's developed Justin Herbert, Davis Mills, Andrew Luck, and has a history with Jim Harbaugh. Defensive coordinator.
And he was here with the Bears as well.
Yes, he was. And thank you. And I think for defensive coordinator, you go with Vic Fangio. Naturally, that's the obvious fit. However, I'd like to throw in a dark horse sleeper, which is Mike McDonald. McDonald was the defensive coordinator at University of Michigan, came from brother John Harbaugh in Baltimore. So I think that's a great fit. Special teams coordinator, again, whoever you want to hire, somebody that can assist Jim, and I'm sure he'd find somebody there. And then I know Cromer was a offensive line coach that was paired or linked to the idea of Jim Harbaugh if he goes to any place. So I think that's what we have to look forward to. If you want to throw in other names, Dable, Frazier, anybody else, feel free, but I'm not as high on those people as others. And then I guess to put the final bow on it, just keep the hope up. Bears fans, I know there's some excitement, some negativity, but I think that the one thing that's very clear is we're on a better path today than we were yesterday. It's just the fact of the matter. There's no way that you can dispute that. It doesn't get much lower than what we've been going through for the past couple of years. And outside of that, Greg, I just want to say thank you for having me on your platform. I appreciated kind of hanging out with you and watching the press conference, talking chalk about the Bears. And I look forward to doing it again if you have me.
Yeah, no, you were absolutely great. Like I said, we've kind of just become familiar with each other in the last couple of weeks with our shared love and interest for Jim Harbaugh as the Chicago Bears head coach. And I just enjoyed some of your interactions. You seem like a guy that keeps it light, but also extremely informative. You know, you brought a lot to the table here today with insight that I don't necessarily bring. You know, I'm just like George. I'm just a fan in the stands. Well, he's in the suite staying warm, but I'm the fan in the stands, you know, staying cold and waiting for this team to heat up. So you brought a lot here today, and you're absolutely welcome on my show whenever you want. Unfortunately to Trae, you know, he did just, you know, we get a happy birthday, you know, I'm sorry. It was Trae's birthday. I'm sorry. I thought that was a comment, but it was from my banners, you know, at the bottom. You know, I got to keep my Harbaugh fired banner up. But unfortunately for Trae, he had to leave us early to take care of his mom. And then I know he had to pick up his son from school too. So he's got a bit of a juggling act going on right now. So hopefully everything works out with Trae. Trae and I will be on, you know, whenever our schedules line up. But as far as Braggs in the Stands is concerned, you're always welcome here, Jordan. So I appreciate you again. Why don't you tell people once again where they can find you on Twitter or anything else that you happen to be doing as far as Bears coverage?
Absolutely. Well, Chad, I do just want to say one thing. I do apologize. I know I've seen a few people say, hey, photography, cinematography, blinds, things like that. I apologize. I'm a little bit of a bad boy. I've been doing this while I'm at work. This is literally my office. And rather than get up and try to close the blinds and everything, I just want to
you're fine.
So yeah, and you can find me at Jordan T. Silvera, as Greg put it there. That's my Twitter handle. I talk. Let me be clear. I love Chicago Bears football. You'll find that that's pretty much exclusively what I talk about. However, I love football and the NFL more than that even. So if you have any questions at all about football personnel, draft prospects, Chicago Bears, anything under the sun, I routinely post threads and deeper thoughts and analysis regarding Chicago Bears stuff. Brian Flores, Jim Harbaugh, whether Baker Mayfield should be re-signed in Cleveland, where they should go. Little PS, they should draft Sam Powell and just run it back with a cheap quarterback so they can pay all the other talent, things like that. But again, if you're at all interested in the work I do, my Twitter handle's there. It's Jordan Silvera is my name, and with the little T in the middle for Tyler, and that's my Twitter handle. So thank you, Greg.
All right. Well, thanks again, Jordan, for coming on today, and I'll find you on those Twitter streets. Appreciate you bringing it today and keeping it classy on the Bears Twitter sphere. Bears Twitter sphere.
We'll talk soon, Greg. Thank you.
Absolutely. Bear down.
Right. Bye-bye. Bear down. Bye-bye.
That is Jordan Silvera of the Bears Twitter that we all know and love, but a guy that certainly brought it today. You know, I had put it out there that a lot of people could join if they wanted to talk, but you know, this show is now running on 2 hours and 40 minutes. The press conference went well over an hour, I imagine, through that. So it kind of broke this up in a way where, you know, unfortunately, I can't have 5 guests on. I know Will was dying to come on. I had some different people texting me and DMing me to come on and send them the link. And I apologize to those of you that I might have got your hopes up for hopping on here today. But, you know, two and a half, almost 3 hours is plenty to react to this. We've heard what George had to say. You've heard my thoughts here to start the show, to my reaction to Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. If you didn't get to hear it, you're welcome to go back and listen. Certainly was heated before George McCaskey came on. And now I'm just kind of befuddled after what I've heard from George McCaskey after with that reaction in regards to that. So, you know, it's just been a long day. We got what we wanted done as far as Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace being shown the door. But, you know, George McCaskey didn't lend us much relief to his, you know, has he changed his understanding of what's flawed with the structure, you know, in the front office for the Chicago Bears and what he and Ted are accountable for, you know. So it's kind of like it's hard to say how today's a weird feeling, and now you got Olin Kreutz, taking shots, back and forth with George, taking shots at him during the Zoom meeting. So never a dull moment when it comes to Bears coverage, never a dull moment on Bears Twitter. And that's where you'll be able to find me. I'm going back to basketball. I'll be, trying to catch a Bulls game here soon. One of the hottest teams in the NBA. And of course, my Purdue Boilermakers, one of the top teams in the country. So, my focus is a lot on basketball right now. We will be keeping our ear to the grindstone as far as when the Bears make their hires at general manager and head coach. And when they do make those hires, we'll go live again and talk about it. And then maybe some of you that wanted to join the show today can join then, and we can get your thoughts and reactions to everything. Because again, I apologize for not being able to bring more people on. I apologize to those of you that were hoping for more Trae Tunes and less Braggs, but it is what it is. Trae had duty calls, and he's a good family man, taking care of his mom. Adam, I appreciate you with the kind words. We're just having fun over here. First Bears show in a long time for me. I think early November was my last Bears-oriented show, so shook the cobwebs off a little bit in regards to that. So, again, if you want to, for Trae Tunes, as far as he's concerned, most days you can find him talking sports and playing hits on the Trae Tunes Show, weekdays, 12 to 2 p.m., live only on Twitch. And, I've been seeing him stream across other platforms here recently, so maybe he needs to change his graphic, because I have seen him been streaming on Twitter and Facebook, been using a little more StreamYard here recently for some of your viewers that enjoy what he does. But you can find him on Twitch at www.twitch.tv/Trae Tunes. And, at Trae Tunes is his handle. So make sure you go and find him. And I'm sure very soon that Trae and I will be coming on. Maybe even, tonight the national championship is on. So probably just rest up and watch that. But I'd love to be able to do a show here soon with Trae, so we can react to this. And then, of course, let our guy Will come on and completely lose his mind on both of us, because he's very upset. He called me probably, 5 times to come on. He probably called Trae 10 times. But Will's just going to have to eat this participation trophy for now, and we'll get his thoughts on the subject later. So with that being said, thanks again for everybody for joining today. Appreciate Jordan Silvera for joining us, and of course Trae Tunes jumping on early on and giving his thoughts. Hope everything's going okay with you. And that's it. This is Braggs in the Stands. Another tough year of Bears coverage. I've been doing this now for a little over 3 years, almost 4 years, and that kind of coincided with the start of the Matt Nagy era and Mitchell Trubisky era and the Ryan Pace. Obviously he's been around a little longer than that, but it has been a fun ride, kind of getting into Bears coverage. There I am with Matt Nagy at Bears 100 and also Ryan Pace. They are very nice people, and for a long time I rooted for them. And for a long time, I rooted for them as at the starts of their careers here. And then even in these last couple of years, last year and this year specifically, when I've been very hard on Ryan Pace, but definitely even harder on Matt Nagy, I rooted for him to prove me wrong. Unfortunately, he was, proving me right in a lot of aspects. And I take no satisfaction in that. As I've said, I've had a lot of good interaction with both of those guys. Pace was busting my balls at training camp this year, saying like, yeah, I know exactly who you are, and I, because sometimes I reintroduce myself to him thinking, how's he going to know a simpleton Braggs in the Stands, but he, was pretty good about remembering who I was. And Matt always gave me, his courtesy and respect when I ran into him and gave me his time of day. So, I wasn't rooting against these guys by any means, but after last year in their press conference, the collaboration press conference, where they blamed all the problems with the Bears from the last few years prior on the quarterback. I just felt that was extremely insulting to anybody that follows this team closely, because anybody that does would have been able to tell you that this was much bigger than a quarterback problem. And for me to hear my GM, head coach, president, and CEO and owner all say in unity and collaboratively that it was just the quarterback, and if they just get the quarterback right, then everything else is fine, and we're the envy, the culture here is the envy of the league. I just found all of that to be extremely insulting. And I'm not I may be a diehard, eternal optimistic Bears fan, but I'm not a dumbass, and I know what I see. And sometimes you have to call it like you see it, unfortunately. And the writing's been on the wall for quite some time with Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, and they needed to be fired, and it needed to be said. And sometimes you got to give tough love. And that's what we've been doing here, for the last month or for the last year, in regards to these guys, and now they're gone. So hopefully the Bears can get it right. Hopefully we get a little luck on our sides and George McCaskey can get this right, because it doesn't give me much optimism that he's going to, as a self-admitted fan doing these evaluations with a bunch of people in his, in his room that, I don't have much confidence in, outside of Bill Polian, who I have respect for with his resume. But at the same time, just like Ernie Accorsi, a guy that isn't attached to this organization, he can give recommendations all day, but if they don't end up working out, he's not going to have to sit up here like we saw today with George McCaskey and answer any questions to why it didn't work out. So there's no accountability there. I can hey, call me up. I'll make recommendations. Then I'll just hide behind a curtain and you'll never see from me when it doesn't work out. That's not how this works. So we'll see how it all goes. Excuse me, I'm by myself, so I couldn't put myself backstage. But, little disconcerting. But at the same time, we got Nagy and fired Nagy and Pace out. So that's step one. Now we see who they hire. That's step two. Then winning football is step three. So it's a long process. It's a long road. Thanks again to everybody that followed along with Braggs in the Stands this year, from training camp to preseason, regular season coverage. We had a lot of fun moments. They were mostly lows, but we've had some highs. We saw what Justin Fields, could bring to the table here in the city of Chicago. We, maybe didn't get enough flashes, but certainly enough for anybody to say this kid has a lot of potential. And if they bring in the right head coach that can run a consistent offense, we may have a shot at finally having a top line franchise quarterback in the National Football League. So we're going to have to wait and see. It's not a finished product by any means with Justin Fields. He's still got a long way to go, but this kid has a lot of potential. And I don't think there was any better highlight than this one right here with Justin Fields, making a San Francisco defense that's headed to the playoffs look really silly on this play here. So, if we can get it right and Justin Fields can get the right coach in here to help him become what we all think he can, then I think that, the sky's the limit for this team. So we're going to have to wait and see what that is and how it's going to be done. But, my hopes are still very high. And then, of course, you have, David Montgomery also along his side. And those are the things, the positives you can take, at least offensively. And then they have definitely some pieces defensively as well. But, all eyes are on the quarterback. And that's what we're going to have to wait and see, is if they can get this right and do right by Justin Fields and not let him be the next, bust along a long list of quarterbacks that didn't work out here in the city of Chicago for one reason or another. So we'll have to wait and see. But again, thank you to everybody for following along with the coverage here at Braggs in the Stands. I just have fun. I am just a fan in the stands. I don't do this for money. I don't do this for anything other than my own entertainment. And the fact that some of you enjoy what I bring and follow along with it is very humbling and gratifying. Certainly something I enjoy doing, and try to pick and choose my spots. I got a 3-year-old, beautiful almost 4-year-old daughter at home that I try to give as much time as I can to. So haven't been doing as many shows as I'd like to lately, but I pick and choose my spots today. Definitely, it's like 4 degrees outside, so we're not laying bricks. So had to hop on today to react to the Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace news. So I think that puts a bow on the 2021 season. Here's to 2022 being much better. So again, thank you to everybody in the chat for tuning in today. Thank you for all of you that have been tuning in all season long. And I'll see you on Bears Twitter. And always, always bear down.
Detroit sucks. Detroit sucks.